car. In 5 minutes' time, the 1996 Formula One World Championship Grand Prix season will be starting here at Melbourne. New location, new track, new cars, new engines, major driver changes. No less than 7 of the top drivers have switched teams, including, of course, David Coulthard, who has gone to McLaren, Martin Brundle, who has gone to Jordan, Michael Schumacher, who has gone to Ferrari, Eddie Irvine has gone to Ferrari, but there is a man who has not moved, and he hopes he's going to benefit from it. Damon Hill, who has the advantage of 6 years now with the Williams-Renault team. He has the advantage of having won 4 Grand Prix last year and 6 the year before. Irvine third on the grid with and ahead of Schumacher. Mika Häkkinen an excellent 5th. Sean Lacey the top Benetton, and he was 2nd fastest in the warm-up this morning. Berger was 3rd fastest in the warm-up. Rubens Barrichello well up in the new Jordan Peugeot. Mika Salo in the top 10 in the Tyrrell, a great improvement on last year. Jos Verstappen in the footwork Ford has been sensational. Johnny Herbert in the Sauber Ford is one of the changes. And Fisichella there, the Italian ex-Formula 3 champion, is new to Formula 1, as is Riccardo Rosset in the footwork Hart. Martin Brundle and Pedro Diniz are the last 2 on the grid, because although 22 cars and drivers tried to qualify, because of a new rule which says that if you do not do a time within 107% of the pole position time, you do not start. The 240 cars of Andrea Montermini and Luca Badoer failed to start. And that, in pole position, is creating history. That's Jacques Villeneuve that you've just seen. Here is Damon Hill.
Well, Damon Hill done extremely well, of course, right at the front end of the grid on the front row. But further back, Martin Brundle had a very frustrating time. He had an engine problem with the Peugeot on his Jordan on the Saturday morning session, and that compromised tremendously his ability to set the car up for the afternoon. He missed all the morning session. David Coulthard was another one who had a spin on his first flying lap on the one Saturday afternoon session, and then he really drew himself back a bit, and he didn't push himself too hard for fear of falling foul of that 107% rule. So Coulthard starts back in 13th place for his first Grand Prix. But for me, the real star of qualifying was Mika Häkkinen, who came back after that really tremendously severe accident at Adelaide last year. Many doubted he'd even make it to be on the grid here at Melbourne, but qualifying the McLaren, which hasn't gone particularly well, in 5th place was an absolutely superb achievement.
And before Brian Hart sends me a solicitor's letter, let me quickly correct myself. The footwork is, of course, propelled by his fine V8 engine. And Michael Schumacher there, for the first time in a Ferrari, is being propelled by a V10 engine. That's new to Ferrari, who are famous for their V12s. Now, Mika Häkkinen there, who is starting from 5th on the grid, was only 15th fastest in the warm-up this morning, and his teammate David Coulthard in the other new McLaren was way down in 14th place. So 14th and 15th are not good for the McLaren team. They said that the cars were badly balanced, they're lacking grip, they're carrying a lot of rear wing to try to increase downforce.
Now, interestingly, whilst Häkkinen was certainly quick in qualifying, I think the race may prove a bigger problem. He's certainly not yet back up to full fitness, hardly any surprise. And indeed, I saw him put on a strap holding his as a head support, as a helmet support prior to the race. Now, there's Pedro Lamy. He's going to start from the pit lane. He has not made it onto the grid. And, in fact, it won't make too much difference. He qualified back in 17th place. So a little bit of a gain there for Martin Brundle.
So the Grand Prix season is almost off. Very shortly they will be starting on the formation lap. 3.275 miles around this superb Melbourne Albert Park track with its lake. And you'll be able to see it from the driver's point of view as well.
And Hill's overtaken Villeneuve there. He's looking in his mirrors. He wants to let Villeneuve go by. Hill, I'm sure, just checking how much grip he had on the inside, and that is not the line. Turn 1 there, an overtaking point, down to second gear, 70 miles an hour, up through the gears now, coming through turn 2. That's absolutely flat out, no real problem. Up through to 4th, 5th, 6th gear, and coming down to, this will be another overtaking point, into turn 3, braking from 185 right down to second gear. Now, I think this next section, you can see it turn right, that's that turn 3, then the left, then the next right. We may well see an incident there. I think there's a pretty good chance that we may see some first lap incident as the drivers all try and find their way through 4th gear. Looks like Villeneuve is on his first time leading the pack through, of course, his first time he's ever taken part in a Grand Prix, and he'll be warming up his tyres and brakes and just checking his speed, making sure he's not going to end up too far ahead on the field. We're about a third of the way around the lap now, and through that right-hander, turn 6, up through the gears to turn 7 as the left-hander, turn 8 we call that fast right-hand sweep. That's absolutely flat out too. Then hard on the brakes, down from 180 miles an hour right down to second gear, and 60, 70 miles an hour through turn 9, through turn 10, that's flat out. Now this next section is certainly been one of the hairiest of all for the drivers. They go through that fast left-hand sweep at up to 180 miles an hour, absolutely flat on the throttle with no lifting, and we hear that Frenson's car has been there's some kind of problem with Frenson's car, and it's slowed down at the turn 3 area. Now this is 4th gear through there, turn 11, turn 12, 140 miles an hour through at the exit of this point. Villeneuve weaves around, warms up the tyres, followed by Hill, followed by Irvine, by Schumacher, Hakkinen, Alesi, Berger. Now, we're coming down to turn 13 next. We'll probably get a view of the leaders or the head of the field as they do that. This is the third of the 3 overtaking points. They're coming into it now. They'll be braking from 180 down to about probably 60, 70 miles an hour for here. This is the third and last opportunity to overtake on this circuit. They're about 2/3 of the way around. It seems amazing that tyres should need to be warmed up when we've got a track temperature of 36 degrees. But these tyres do need to run at about 80 or 90 degrees to get optimal grip, and that is indeed Frenson. Frenson has pulled off. What a disappointment for the German here. This has not been but a particularly good weekend for Sauber Ford. Their progress has improved throughout it, and Frenson there clearly, he's got some problem. He doesn't look particularly well there. Maybe he's just trying to get out of the car. So they'll be coming back towards that, coming up towards the line, and for the start of the Grand Prix.
Out of the final turn, crossed corner, which is turn 16, so it looks like 18 cars will be starting from the grid, because we know that Lamy is going to be starting from the pit lane, and we know that Heinz-Harald Frenson sadly is out of the race in the Sauber with the new Ford V10 engine. Remember that we're expecting a lot of attrition in this race. It is very hot here. The temperature is rising all the time. Remember, too, that you're not going to be seeing a man with a green flag walk across the back of the grid, because the whole thing has been automated. The race will start with a system of lights. There are 5 rows of red lights across the track, and when those lights go out, the race starts. Go! And Villeneuve, in his first Formula One Grand Prix start, takes the lead from Damon Hill, and Eddie Irvine passes Michael Schumacher and goes up into 3rd position. And he's going through on the inside of Damon Hill, I do believe. A sensational start by Eddie Irvine in the Ferrari, who indeed is up to 2nd place, and Schumacher has passed the Williams. Down into 3rd and 4th position goes Damon Hill, and wow, that's one of the Jordans. This is what we feared at this corner, and that looks very nasty indeed. The Jordan goes flying through the air into the wall. There is absolutely no doubt that the Australian Grand Prix will be stopped. Indeed, the red flag has gone out. It's Martin Brundle, and miracle of miracles. This is well nigh unbelievable Martin Brundle gets out of the car, and he is seemingly all right in terms of us. Now, here it is. Let's have a look at it again. Now, watch the Jordan, the gold car, in the centre of your picture.
Watch the McLaren. That's David Coulthard, who slides sideways. He runs into Martin Brundle, making up a good start. Martin Brundle's Jordan goes over spectacularly. What a tremendous tribute to the strength of these Formula One cars. The FIA have progressively increased the strength of the cars, and when that machine is turned over, I think Martin will just not believe he managed to get out of that, and you can see he's absolutely fine. This has been a miserable weekend for Martin Brundle. Through, we've got Mika Hakkinen. There is the flying Jordan in the background of Martin Brundle. The car rolls over several times. It looks like the back of the car is broken. That's the point at which the engine bolts onto the back of the chassis. The engine is, in fact, part of the chassis. The rear suspension on these cars bolts onto the gearbox, and that bolts onto the back of the engine, and that's clearly broken away partially anyway. Looks like Johnny Herbert was involved in that as well.
Well, let me, to the extent that I can, without being there, reassure you that Martin Brundle seems to be perfectly all right. You can see him in the course car and the back there. He got out of the car, managed to undo his belts, seemingly no bones broken, no problems, and here it is again. Now watch the McLaren of Coulthard. See, he moves across, collects the Jordan. Onto its nose goes the car, through the gravel trap into the wall, and of course Martin Brundle was completely blameless in that. He was on his line. Suddenly he's faced with a car moving from his right to the left, and it just takes him straight out of the race off the track.
And we can see there once again with the Jordan, now the smoke's died down, how literally that car has broken on its back, but that's what it should do. Make no mistake about that. The important bit is that the central survival cell, that carbon fibre cockpit, has remained intact. That's what it's designed to do, and the energy has been dissipated. In fact, I think the car broke in the midpoint as it was being launched into the air for the first time. Now, whether we'll get a further replay of that, I don't know, but it looked to me as if one of the Tyrrells, and maybe it was Sarlo back there, touched David Coulthard. That slewed David Coulthard across the track. By this time, Coulthard was out of control, and then he hit. Let's have another look. Now, look for the second McLaren. There we see Sarlo. There's Coulthard. Let's watch carefully. Now, it looked as if, to me, Coulthard ran up the back of Sarlo as Sarlo brakes behind the Jordan of Rubens Barrichello. There, over the Jordan goes. Then the back brakes of the Jordan, and then it goes into the gravel trap, slowing the car down before it comes to rest relatively gently at the end against the barrier. But I think what happened there was that David Coulthard may have been caught out by the slowing down Sarlo ahead of him in the Tyrrell when he braked hard because of Barrichello, and then Brundle's car was in fact launched over the top of Johnny Herbert's tyre. I think that's what launched him in the air after Brundle himself was hit by David Coulthard. A typical racing accident, it has to say. It's always very difficult. Those drivers are on the right-hand side of the circuit. The line is on the left-hand side, and so as the line is on the left, that's where the most grip is. And on the inside, it's dusty and very easy to lock up the wheels. It's the first time those drivers had used that line. This is one of the real danger parts of Formula One, but it's just such good news that the cars are strong these days and that Martin Brundle has escaped completely unscathed from that dreadful accident.
Yes, and it looks like very good news that Johnny Herbert, who was involved in that, is okay too. I was watching his Sauber very carefully after Martin Brundle had started to go off the track. Johnny Herbert had the same heart-stopping experience as Brundle did when a car suddenly appears in front of him unexpectedly, but it looked to me as though he managed to avoid making contact with the Jordan. So there is one very wrecked Jordan Peugeot car. Now, Formula One being what it is and Martin Brundle being what he is, it would not surprise me in the least after he has had a checkup, particularly from Professor Sid Watkins, who is the FIA's medical delegate and is responsible for making sure that the drivers are okay to take part again in something like this. But it would not surprise me to see Martin Brundle getting in the spare Jordan and having another go. And the restart is going to be in 15 minutes' time at 25 minutes past the hour. as you ride with Damon Hill on the restart, watching Jacques Villeneuve pulling away.
And that was a superb start by Jacques Villeneuve, his first ever Formula One start. He just locks the wheel. Now, soon after this, Damon Hill gets it rather wrong. Villeneuve is off. He got a very good start. He's a little bit off the throttle. He's having to back off, and I think this is where the Jordan of Irvine gets the momentum. He comes by on the left-hand side, followed by Schumacher. Schumacher is now coming alongside and pulling ahead with the Ferrari. Schumacher, of course, in the Ferrari for the first time. They're then going to come down to this turn 3, and it's on the right-hand side. You can see some sparks coming out of Schumacher's Ferrari. That's quite normal. It's just bottoming. Now, that was where the incident started for the Coulthard-Brundle incident. And by this time, though, you can see how far ahead Jacques Villeneuve is. That shows the importance of getting that clean start. Jacques Villeneuve using that hand-operated clutch that he's decided to have on his Williams to great effect. So, despite having 2 years of driving Indy cars with rolling starts, it's clear that Jacques' old experience of standing starts from his pre-IndyCar days has still stood him in very good stead.
So that's the position here, but down in the pit lane is Tony Jardine. Let's be hearing from him.
Martin Brundle has just arrived back in the pit lane in a vehicle brought by the marshals. He looks very fit. He was smiling. He got patted on the back. There were huge cheers from the grandstand opposite, and he literally sprinted to the back of the garage. The T-car is being readied, but he's gone into the back of the garage at the moment, but he looks very fit and well, considering that massive accident, Murray.
Yeah, as I was saying, Professor Watkins will give him a check-over, and Sid Watkins is enormously experienced in Formula One and other medical matters. He will make sure that Martin's okay, and he certainly won't say he's okay if he isn't. But as you watch the remains of the Jordan being removed, let me just tell you that Damon Hill won't wish to benefit from Martin Brundle's misfortune, but nevertheless he's going to do so, because that was a poor start by Damon, an incredible start by Eddie Irvine, an excellent start by Michael Schumacher, and Damon was down to 4th when the accident happened.
And we can see as they lower the chassis onto that back of that flatbed truck, the higher cockpit size that we've got this year in Formula One. You see the black rim around that cockpit. That has to be much higher, probably 4 inches higher. And you can see now as we get that close up, that's foam all the way around that cockpit opening. You can see the top of the roll bars had a very hard time. That's been worn away as the car's gone over. It's a very fortunate Martin Brundle. I think, in fact, just a cover on the front's probably come off there, but rather than being worn away. Now that I can see it clearly, you can see the top of the red section further back. But that will have undoubtedly helped support Brundle's head as he was going along upside down at some point, and he really will have benefited from that new move that's been introduced this year.
Now, we were having a look at that Jordan monocoque. There's been a lot of dissension about that because the new rule for the higher cockpit sides can be interpreted in 2 ways. Jordan chose to interpret it one way, and most of the teams decided to interpret it another. For instance, you can see how much higher the sides of the cockpit alongside Michael Schumacher's head are. And some of the teams think that the Jordan arrangement is illegal, and there's going to be a lot of discussion about it afterwards. So it was ironic that of all the cars, it was a Jordan that was involved in that crash. But as Jonathan has just said, it seems to have done the business as far as Martin Brundle's head protection is concerned.
McLaren Mercedes pit at the moment, and David Coulthard is not going to make it. It looks like he came out of the garage. He's been pushed back in, crossed arms from the McLaren mechanics, and drama. He came in incidentally with the rear of his car quite badly damaged and the rear wing broken.
There is Sid Watkins on the right, the man I've been talking about. He is out of the medical car, and you can see he's having a discussion with Martin, who's giving him the news about what happened with a half smile on his face. What an incredible chap Martin Brundle is. One of the most experienced Grand Prix drivers of them all, because this will be, assuming he starts it sometime, his 143rd Grand Prix, and this is his 8th Grand Prix team. Up goes the thumb. Listen to the crowd. They know a good sport when they see one, and that's Martin Brundle.
Well, the regulations will have dictated that Brundle has to be signed off effectively by Sid Watkins. And in this sort of situation, Sid Watkins has a pretty pragmatic way of handling it. If basically Martin was making sense in the way that he handled the accident and looked entirely lucid, as obviously he does, he would have little hesitation in passing him.
Yeah, Sid said of one of the drivers on one occasion who had been unconscious in the cockpit, and who came round, he said, where are you? And this chap said where he was, and said, since he doesn't normally know where he is at any time of the day or night, I knew he was okay. So that is Eddie Irvine in the Ferrari, waiting to go again and hoping he gets as good a start the second time round as he did the first.
I'm right, just opposite Martin Brundle now. His hands are shaking quite a lot, but he's looking determined as ever, swigging the last bit of water. They're looking at their watches, and he's getting ready, and his wife is right behind him. So hopefully we will see Martin at the end of the pit lane very soon in the Jordan Peugeot.
When my father raced motorcycles, my mother said to me once, there are two kinds of wives, those who go and worry and those who don't go and worry. She said, I was one of the former, and Liz Brundle is one of the former. She goes with Martin to nearly all the races, and it's a very worrying situation for a wife, of course, to know that something could happen, as happened to Martin, and she will be even more relieved than the rest of us to know that he's obviously quite all right. And incidentally, did you see how incredibly fit he was after that enormous impact? He practically runs halfway round the lap to get back into the car.
Now, taking our minds back to that original start, it will have been clear to Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher behind him that those two were on the inside of the track. That, again, is the part of the track that is not used regularly because the racing line is on the left-hand side as they go down there. That's where Jacques Villeneuve is, and that's why, although the first corner turns right, pole position is on the left-hand side. It's the most favourable side because that's where the most grip is. Now, having made one start, there will be a degree of improvement in the track conditions on that right-hand side. So therefore, both Damon Hill and Michael Schumacher should benefit in second and fourth places respectively. So we may well see a better start from those two. And certainly from Damon Hill's side, he'll be determined not to get down as far as fourth place by the third corner.
Now, Damon Hill is getting a second chance to stay ahead of the Ferraris. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is getting a second chance, because as a result of the race being stopped, he has been able to go back to the Sauber pit, and I presume to have got into the spare car. I'm not aware of his original race car having been brought back, and they wouldn't be too happy to start him in it anyway, because they wouldn't know what the problem was and whether it was able to be remedied. So, good news and bad news for some of them. Mika Häkkinen getting out to rejoin the car. Ukko Katayama stalled on the grid in that first start. Heinz-Harald Frentzen stopped on the first lap. Pedro Lamy started from the pit lane. Martin Brundle crashed. Johnny Herbert was involved with it. And that was before the fourth corner. And that is Mika Häkkinen's fitness man. Martin Brundle goes out to join the grid. And is he going to get a reception? If he wasn't a hero before, he certainly is going to be now. The man from Kings Lynn will be starting from the pit lane, but that won't be as much of a disadvantage for him here at Melbourne as it might be in some other locations, because, as I said earlier on, anybody who finishes this race is going to be very well up in the order. Tony Jardine is with Johnny Herbert.
Johnny, first of all, glad you're okay, but can you tell us what happened from in the cockpit there? What did you see?
Well, all I saw is everybody went to the right-hand side on turn 3, or into turn 3, and it was very, very dirty. I was surprised that everybody did that because they left the outside open. Anyway, I think someone touched the back of David, who then that spun him round, and he was completely sideways on the track. So then I had to brake because of that, and I think Martin was still flat out behind, and he just went straight into the back of me and went over the top of me, upside down. It looked very, very spectacular, I must admit, from where I was, so he must be very good on TV.
Well, he's okay as well, so that's a great relief. What sort of state is your car in?
Well, my car's too badly damaged because the suspension's gone, the rear wing's gone, so they'd have to change all that. The only chance I would have, which I think is probably nil, is because of Heinz-Harald had the problems with his car, he's now got the spare car, so if they ever got that back, if we found the problem, then maybe, but I very much doubt it.
So you can help me with pit lane commentary?
This is all I ever do. You're getting a bit like Palmer used to.
Thank you, Johnny.
I think Johnny Herbert's previous remark fits into the, apart from that, Mrs. Lincoln, what did you think of the play? Because it was a pretty dramatic occasion for everybody. And levity aside, let us hope and pray that it doesn't happen again. Gerhard Berger there was, and this, of course, is Damon Hill, who has rejoined the car, and he'll be really going for it this time. Out-dragged by Villeneuve, out-dragged by Irvine, out-dragged by Michael Schumacher at their first start. Getting past here is easier than at some circuits because there are one or two passing places at Melbourne, but the last thing you want to be doing is starting from fourth position effectively before you've got to the fourth corner. Well, Martin Brundle starting from the pit lane, in fact, won't be much of a penalty at all because he was starting on the back row of the grid anyway in 19th place. He was obviously trying to make up some places before the accident happened. But it seems amazing, and I'm sure it must seem amazing to many people, as to how someone like Brundle or a Grand Prix driver can have such a huge accident and then just, with great aplomb, run back to the pits, jump in a spare car and race again. But as a driver, you really do tend to put these things out of your mind. And Martin will be sitting in that Jordan, and the accident that he had will have happened so quickly, and he'll shut it out of his mind, and he'll just be focusing on the race again. He'll be focusing on the setup of his car, on going around, how he's going to play the race, this sort of thing. He won't be reflecting on that, and it'll probably only be tonight when he looks back and sees that accident on television that he'll think just how incredible it was that he could A, survive, and B, go on to take part in the race at all. 17 on the grid, plus Martin Brundle in the pit lane makes 18. 20 started the first time, and don't ask me who exactly they'll be. I think David Coulthard looks as though he's not starting. I'm a bit doubtful about Johnny Herbert, who's just been talking to Tony Jardine. Those are the two non-starters. Coulthard is in the spare car in the garage. Johnny Herbert is not starting. So it hasn't been a very good race for Sauber so far. First of all, Frentzen stops, and now Herbert does not start. Well, the spare McLaren would certainly have been set up for Mika Hakkinen, and David Coulthard's a good few inches taller than Hakkinen, so that car will be being rapidly changed to suit David Coulthard at the moment, if it hasn't already been completed. So that means that David Coulthard will also start from the pit lane, so we're going to have a bit of a British battle back there when the field goes by. Martin Brundle and David Coulthard both starting when the field goes by, and we shall obviously keep you in touch with how they're getting on. Well, this is certainly a test for the new starting system, because we've not only had the new starting system successfully working, but now we've had the new abort system hopefully successfully working. It shows every sign of having done so far. You're looking from the point of view of Damon Hill just over his roll bar. You'll see quite a few of the cars have got a sort of miniature conning tower on top of the roll bar. That's Eddie Irvine, and in front of him was Jacques Villeneuve. Now we're with Michael Schumacher, and in front of him is Damon Hill. So to the left, Jacques Villeneuve, to the right, Damon Hill, and here is another formation lap. This time, Jacques Villeneuve moves away clearly in front of Damon Hill. Damon wasn't going to fall foul to the incident that cost Schumacher a disqualification at Silverstone. Well, they've all moved away. They've all pulled away. You can see a bit of dry ice bouncing around, probably on the track after they've all moved away. That's used to keep the engines cool. Through this turn 2 again, let's get orientated, weaving to get the tyres warm. Now it's coming down into this next turn 3 where the incident happened. And as Johnny Herbert said too, that right-hand line is the dirty line. It's not used normally. It'll have to be used to try and overtake, and of course that's what was going on. And I suspect we'll see a rather more prudent approach from everybody. So down from 185 to 60 miles an hour in second gear for this right-hander that's just disappearing to the left-hand side of our screens. There's the Ligier Panis, and then Tyrrell Katayama, Fisichella, Lamy and Rosset, the Brazilian, and finally Pedro Diniz, who was in one of last year's yellow 40 cars. Then out of the turn 3, 4, 5 complex, they're coming now up to turn 6. Jacques Villeneuve leading the field once again as they warm up. You see these bollards they've got on the inside of the curves. They've been very clever here. The circuit's been beautifully presented. Even the gravel traps have been colour keyed, and the bollards are designed. They're not concrete, they're not metal, they're plastic. They're designed to deter people from using them. And we may also see some little tiny yellow triangular kind of bollards. We just see them passing the film here. Another bollard on the apex of that corner as well. Well, this is turn 9, and down again from 180 when they're fully on song to 60, 70 miles an hour-ish for that. Second gear again. You can see that a second gear corner is still 70-odd miles an hour. There are line markings on the road here because this is in fact public road. When the Grand Prix goes away, that'll be back to commuter traffic using it in Melbourne. Then through the left-hander, accelerating up. This is this long, fast, sweeping left-hander, which is taken flat out, pumping up through the gears to 180 miles an hour before a dab on the brakes, down from 6th, or if you're Jordan, down from 7th to that left-hand corner, and then the right that follows it. We can see them just coming through there now. That's about 120 miles an hour in 4th gear. This is a fast circuit for a street circuit, and the circuit's pretty smooth, not too many bumps. Now this is turn 13 they're coming down to, so we've got to think of 1s and 3s in terms of overtaking opportunities. That means turn 1, turn 3 and turn 13. They're coming down to it now, and again they'll need to keep. We might see somebody having a go up the inside in the course of the race. The track will be dirty. We may well see some wheel locking. Through turn 13, another second gear corner at about 70 miles an hour. Now the next one, turn 14 that they're coming into, has seen more incidents than the rest of the circuit put together. For some reason, this next right-hander, it's about 100 miles an hour, has caught out a lot of drivers, including Gerhard Berger, who damaged his chassis on the Saturday morning session. And then it's right down to 1st or 2nd gear for that left-hand corner. This last right brings you onto the start-finish straight. That's not taken even with a brake. Now watch the cars keep to the left-hand side as they approach the grid. At the last minute, they'll swerve across to the right so that they don't pick up too much dirt on their tyres before taking up their correct grid positions.
Which they are doing now. Villeneuve goes straight on and stops in the pole position slot. Damon Hill pulls to his right and your left. The rest of them follow suit. 17 on the grid. David Coulthard is behind Martin Brundle in the pit lane. So let's have another go. 58 laps of Melbourne to come. Now, that was a long hold, and again it's a good start from Villeneuve. Is he going to out-drag Damon Hill? Yes, but this time he does not out-drag Irvine. And charging up through the field comes Gerhard Berger, who is right up alongside the Ferrari, where all go now as they come up towards turn 3, the soccer stadium. Damon Hill is 2nd. Irvine is 3rd again and ahead of Michael Schumacher, so he's had a magnificent start the 2nd time as he did the 1st. Villeneuve is already pulling away with a bit of a gap between himself and Damon Hill as they run wide coming out of the left-hander. It's Villeneuve, Hill, Ferrari, Irvine, Ferrari, Schumacher, Berger, Hakkinen is up there, Barrichello is behind Hakkinen, and Alesi is dropping back as they come down the short straight, turn in. There's the shimmering waters of Albert Park Lake in the background, and look at that Melbourne skyline. The drivers won't be doing that. Look at the speed they're doing as they go round the long left-hander, doing about 170 miles an hour. Now down in towards turn 13, Villeneuve, Hill, Schumacher a bit closer to Eddie Irvine, but Irvine is holding station as they go under the bridge. This is turn 13. Port Phillip Bay in the background. Villeneuve towards us. Hill, Irvine, Schumacher. We go round the right-hander with the 2nd Ferrari of Michael Schumacher. And John Alesi follows through next. So the man who was 2nd fastest in the warm-up this morning is up through the race. 6 from the grid, over the line. Look how close it is as Schumacher has a look at Eddie Irvine, but Eddie's not having any, and Alesi is getting closer to the 2 Ferraris in front of him. Villeneuve led Damon Hill in terms of time by half a second at the end of that first lap, and Schumacher is getting very, very worried indeed. All the time he's looking for a way past his teammate, and Eddie Irvine won't give way. Why should he? They're equal in status in the team, although obviously Schumacher, with 2 world championships behind him, is the senior member. Irvine Schumacher, and look at Alesi in the blue and white Benetton Renault, and Martin Brundle has spun. He's lost it at turn 3, which was roughly where the accident happened before. And Martin Brundle looked as though he had lost the engine from the way they were pushing him back. So that is the first retirement of the Australian Grand Prix. Here he is.
So we have the replay there as Brundle tries to outbrake Pedro Diniz in the Ligier. I'm afraid that was a failed manoeuvre. You could see the smoke from his tyres. He locked it up and touched the back of Diniz. Well, that was a mistake from Martin Brundle, but in the circumstances, who can blame him?
Yes, Martin has bad luck on the first time, bad luck on the second time, and Schumacher is now ahead of his teammate Eddie Irvine up into 3rd place. And it's still the two Williams then. Now, we don't suspect. Here's what happened. Schumacher pulls out from behind Eddie Irvine, who gives way and lets the German through at turn 13 towards the end of the lap.
And it's quite clear there that Eddie let Michael Schumacher by. He always said that he would do that to help Schumacher. Eddie Irvine very much knows that he's number 2 in this team, and despite that qualifying Schumacher. But Alesi is right up behind Irvine too now. Alesi really charging in the Benetton.
Yes, John Alesi, ex-Ferrari, now in the Benetton, has caught the second Ferrari of Eddie Irvine and is going for it. Race order, we are now on lap 3 of this 58 lap. Gilles Villeneuve with Damon Hill behind him. Schumacher is up to 3rd, Irvine is down to 4th, 5th is Alesi, 6th is Mika Häkkinen, and you can see how far back he is. The first 5 are close together. Häkkinen dropping back. Barrichello in the remaining Jordan is 7th. Heinz-Harald Frentzen has got going in the Sauber after stopping the first time and is in 8th position. Gerhard Berger down in 9th, so he's lost a good few places. Mika Salo is 10th in the top 10 in the Tyrrell. The brilliant Jos Verstappen, who made such an impression in qualifying, is in 11th place ahead of Olivier Panis. Martin Brundle, the first retirement, 18 drivers left, and David Coulthard is the last of the runners in 18th place. You're watching Jacques Villeneuve, the sensation of Formula One of 1996, already completing the lap. Now the gap was 7/10 of a second. Hill follows him across, and it's still 7/10 of a second.
And a little puff of smoke there. I think I might just have seen whether it was brake or just a wheel locking or something else. I suspect it was wheel locking from Jacques Villeneuve there. Now the pace that these cars are running at is not particularly fast. A 1 minute 35.9 indicates that they might have a fair bit of fuel, and the options available to the teams were to stop once in this race or to stop twice here. If it's once, it should be round about between lap 25 and lap 32, something like that. If it's going to be twice, then it would be round about lap 15 to perhaps lap 25 for the first stop, and about lap 35 to lap 40 for the second. And we'll have to wait and see how the race unfolds before seeing what's going on. But I just wonder if Williams are running a fair bit of fuel there. Williams have generally had probably half a second advantage over the Ferraris, but we can see that Michael Schumacher is already pushing Damon Hill hard. And I would think the indication, therefore, is that Schumacher's car is a bit heavier. Sorry, that Hill's car is therefore a bit heavier than Schumacher's.
Fastest lap of the race so far, Michael Schumacher, 1:35.759, and in doing that, he has closed the gap between himself and Damon Hill to just under a second. Now, in qualifying, consistently, Schumacher was about 0.8 of a second slower than the Williams. He's quicker in the race at the present moment, and if anybody can carry that Ferrari round on his back, it's Michael Schumacher. There won't actually be a need to do so. It's a John Barnard design. The engine has been developed by the ex-Honda Japanese engineer Osamu Goto. He's made a fine job of it, and it may well have been that Ferrari was sandbagging about the reliability of their cars. We don't expect them, or at least I don't expect them, both to last the full race distance. But Schumacher, as you can see, is giving the two Williams drivers a run for their money at the moment, and in the process is pulling away from Eddie Irvine. The gap between the two Ferraris now is 2.4 seconds.
We've really got two distinct trains of cars here. We've got the first 5 led by Villeneuve, and then we've got Mika Häkkinen, who is some 6.2 seconds behind Alesi. Häkkinen in 6th, Alesi in 5th, And when we get a chance to see Hakkinen, look at the queue of cars behind him. He's got Barrichello in 7th, Berger 8th, Frentzen 9th, Salo 10th, Verstappen 11th, and they are all less than a second away from Mika Hakkinen. So Hakkinen, understandably, I think, is holding up a queue of traffic there. Again, the question is his car heavier? Is he just going to stop once, perhaps, and some of those were going to stop twice behind? But we also know that Mika Hakkinen is still not yet up to full race fitness, so that's going to hinder him in the course of the race.
And we also know that the McLaren in the warm-up this morning was carrying a lot of wing in order to overcome or try to overcome a grip problem. And that being so, it could well be that Mika Hakkinen is indeed leading that train and just not letting them get through. He's got the racing line, he's entitled to stick to it, and we're coming through to the end of lap 5. Now, there are the first 3. Villeneuve leading Hill, Schumacher in the Williams-Renault's wheel tracks, Irvine is still 4th, and Schumacher has cut the gap in 3 laps to Damon Hill from 0.9 seconds to 0.7 seconds to 0.6 seconds, and between the top 3 there is a gap of a mere 1.8 seconds, with Eddie Irvine dropping back, and there is the contact. Off spins Rosset, the Brazilian driver. This is his first Grand Prix, and Ricardo Rosset in the Arrows spins off the circuit, gets back on again, and meantime, up at the front, now here's a replay. It's Rosset, and with him is Pedro Lamy in the Minardi.
Well, that was a rather over-ambitious manoeuvre from Rosset there, and he might have damaged his Arrows. We'll have to see what happens there, but he's in his first Grand Prix, and it was fairly early days to try and do that sort of thing. But Schumacher's going to have a tough job getting by Damon Hill. Indeed, I don't think he will until the first round of fuel stops takes place, because the Ferrari, apart from anything else, has been about 5 miles an hour slower in top speed than the Williams, and part of the reason may be the amount of wing it's carrying, and by that we can see that the Williams has quite a big wing angle on with a lot of vertical face, shall we say. The Ferrari has even more, and whilst that helps around the corners, it does slow the car down the straights. Now, you need a bit of a straight line speed advantage to have a chance to go by anywhere, and I just don't think Schumacher will have enough of a margin.
Now, let us consider the implications of this race thus far. Lap 6, we're 1/10 of the distance through it, slightly over, and Grand Prix new boy, Jacques Villeneuve. This is a quite incredible drive already by the young, imperturbable Canadian from Quebec, who dominated Indy racing last year, and he leads the Australian Grand Prix. And Michael Schumacher there is equally meritorious in his way, because this is a new car and driver combination. The car has had very little testing in comparison with the Williams, and we're expecting it to get better and better as the season goes on. Therefore, it is of paramount importance to Damon Hill and to Villeneuve that they pile up points while they've got a potential reliability advantage. And you look now at Eddie Irvine in 4th position, 4 seconds behind the leaders, and you ride with Jean Alesi, looking at the Ferrari of Eddie Irvine in front of him. Jean Alesi, ex-Ferrari driver, chasing this year's Ferrari car, and Alesi is settling down with Benetton extremely well. I've just been talking to Pat Simmons, his race engineer, and Alesi, who has this rather hysterical image, is actually a much calmer man, Pat says, than you would think.
Well, I've always been a huge fan of Alesi ever since he beat me in Formula 1 at Tyrrell 1989. But he's now right up with Eddie Irvine. Now, the Benetton with Renault power also has a straight line speed advantage over the Ferrari. Again, it's not quite as much as the Williams, but probably 3 or 4 miles an hour. And you can just see Alesi pull up and close on Irvine along that straight. This is turn 1. And into turn 2, the next opportunity will be into the next corner, turn 3. But he's probably just still too far behind. And I think Alesi is going to be very concerned about not creating any kind of reputation for being wild. Eddie Irvine also needs to keep calm. He's done a great qualifying performance here, and he doesn't want to end up in a retirement by having a tangle with someone like Alesi. In Alesi and Irvine, you've got 2 of the hardest chargers in Formula 1 here. They've both had reputations for having accidents, and I think they'll both be very keen not to add anything to that here today, because it's going well for both of them.
Yeah, and when Alesi comes in to make his pit stop, looked for the man on the right front wheel, because Alesi came charging into the pit lane this morning for a practice tyre stop, lost control on the dust of the concrete apron and slammed into Mike Jakeman, one of the Benetton mechanics, who I'm glad to say, apart from a bruised ankle and a swollen knee, is all right, and who gamely said he would be taking his place in the tyre changing crew to look after Alesi and of course his teammate Gerhard Berger. So, lap 8 now out of 58, and it's still Villeneuve, but Damon Hill is closing the gap. He's now 0.6 of a second behind his teammate, and he's pulled away 1/10 of a second, although you wouldn't think so at the moment as they go across the line from Michael Schumacher.
Well, Schumacher's having a look there, but just back to that Alesi incident when he hit the mechanic. In fact, it wasn't purely Alesi being reckless. The pit lane has got a very slippery section. The very smooth concrete has been painted, and what you'll see for the first time ever in a pit lane here is that the teams have all put strips of abrasive material down on the entry to their particular pit stop to help the drivers stop without skidding on this very slippery surface. I don't think we're going to see it again. It's a temporary measure being introduced very sensibly to try and avoid any further problems.
Lap 9, 47 to go, and the race pattern has settled down a little as they go past the marina on Albert Park Lake, with Jacques Villeneuve continuing to lead his first Formula One Grand Prix from Damon Hill by 0.7 of a second. Michael Schumacher, there he is, disappearing round turn 11, is 0.6 of a second behind Hill. Irvine is still 4th, Alesi 5th, Hakkinen is 6th, Barrichello is 7th, Gerhard Berger is in 8th position, 9th is Prinsen, and 10th is Mika Salo ahead of Jos Verstappen.
But the race is settling down now into 3 distinct elements. We've got this front trio, Villeneuve, Hill, Schumacher. Then Eddie Irvine leads Jean Alesi, and that's perhaps the closest battle that we've got. Now then, Mika Hakkinen is now 11 seconds behind Alesi in 6th place. He's got Barrichello behind him. Berger's falling all over Barrichello. A big group there. But sadly, further back in the field, David Coulthard is still only in 16th place, and he's now 8 seconds behind Pedro Diniz in the Ligier. So I'm quite sure that Coulthard must have some kind of dire problem there with the McLaren. He's lapping a couple of seconds slower than Diniz too.
Now, all these 3 lead drivers want to win the first race of the year here in Melbourne, but equally, all of them know that probably not all 3 of them will finish because of the stresses of this event, and they may well be holding station a bit at the present moment for a charge later on. And that was a spin, and it looked to me as...
That's Alesi spinning.
And Alesi's car breaking up. And he'll have to come in, and he'll almost certainly be out of the race.
I'm sure what's happened there is that Alesi has had a go at Eddie Irvine, and they've had a coming together on the approach to that turn 3. I think it's very surprising if that's broken of its own accord. Let's have a look. There is the evidence. Alesi comes in the inside. Eddie Irvine closes the door. Well, I think that was a bit harsh. It looked to me, well, let's hope we get a replay to see, but I think Alesi might have done enough to deserve that. No shortage of wheel spin there. Typical Alesi style. You can see the black marks down the side pod. Well, I did say that these two had a reputation of being the hard chargers. Let's have a look. Alesi comes up the inside. Well, frankly, no, I think I'm wrong. I think that's a very late manoeuvre by Jean Alesi there. Eddie Irvine had done enough. He'd started to turn into that corner, and Alesi had a look at the inside and really committed himself to the inside when Eddie Irvine was already turning in. So I think that is a mistake from Jean Alesi, and I don't think they're going to be able to do much about that, Benetton. I think that's probably Alesi into retirement.
Well, his races run whatever, even if they could, it'd be so far down. And that will be the second retirement of the Australian Grand Prix, whereas Alesi comes into the pit lane and he will be retiring to join Martin Brundle. And I have no doubt that there will be a clash of opinions and harsh words probably between Alesi and Irvine. But if Alesi thought he could intimidate, there are those strips that Jonathan was talking about. But if Alesi thought he could intimidate Eddie Irvine, he had most certainly chosen the wrong man. Because Irvine's been through a harsh school of Formula Ford 2000, Formula 3, Formula 3000 in Japan, and now Formula 1, and he knows which side is up.
So the next question is, has any damage occurred to Eddie Irvine's Ferrari? It would have been his left rear wheel that would have been hit. Now, Eddie Irvine's last lap was a 36.6. So we need to look out when we see Irvine next for the right-hand side of that car, the side pod and the rear wing. And obviously, Irvine will either come into the pits. There's no sign of that at the moment. And the Ferrari crew are not getting ready. And I think if he'd had any damage, he would have radioed. There's no sign of the Ferrari crew being poised, ready to take Eddie Irvine. So let's just hope that he's got away from that without damage.
And that will mean, of course, that Mika Häkkinen moves up into 5th position. And up into 6th, Rubens Barrichello is in the points. And Jordan have got massive new sponsorship, which was announced just before the season began. That results in their cars being painted gold instead of last year's colour scheme. And a point in their first race, or more, because we are only on lap 12 out of 58, would be very welcome. Still, Villeneuve leading, Hill 2nd, Schumacher 3rd. Irvine is now 8 seconds behind Michael Schumacher in 4th position, 12 seconds ahead of Mika Häkkinen, and Rubens Barrichello is right up behind the McLaren. So there's a big battle for 6th position. Gerhard Berger is right with them. Mika Salo in 8th place isn't very far behind. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is 9th, and Jos Verstappen is up into the top 10 in the Arrows. Another team that's looking for and certainly deserves more sponsorship than they've got, with a fine car and an excellent driver in Verstappen.
Well, this may well be Jacques Villeneuve's first Grand Prix, but he's certainly showing no lack of form here. He's quite a canny driver. He's been racing in Indy cars when strategy is all important. And indeed, he is now piling on the pressure. He's set a new fastest lap for the race, and that will therefore be a new lap record. He's extended the gap, albeit by a tiny amount, but by that 1.020 seconds that we can see. It's going to be important for Damon not to let Villeneuve extend that gap. 1.3 seconds back to Schumacher, because I suspect that the crucial section is now going to be on the first round of pit stops. And whichever team can manage to get out of the pits faster will end up being ahead. And that could, for example, give Hill a chance to get ahead of Villeneuve, or Schumacher ahead of them both.
Now, last year, Williams had a rather dusty image in terms of good pit stops. Benetton were the shining stars. But over the winter, the Williams team have been drilling and practicing and drilling and practicing day after day to get it right. And Patrick Head says, and he's the team boss, that he doesn't envisage a problem there this year. Now, Ferrari are also extremely good. We know that Michael Schumacher is an inch-perfect man when it comes to stopping in the pit lane to take on more fuel and tyres. And it's of crucial importance that you should do that, because the fuel hose is tremendously heavy, needs 2 people to support it, and if you're not absolutely in the right place, the man will have to move and you can lose a lot of time. So it's still Villeneuve, Hill, Schumacher. This is lap 13, 58-lap race.
And Damon has responded there. He's closed the back up, gapped back up. He's determined not to let Jacques Villeneuve think that he can pull away at whim. But we saw a Lacey come up the inside of Irvine out of frustration. Let's just hope it doesn't happen behind here, because we've got exactly the same situation. We've got Mika Häkkinen holding up Barrichello, holding up Berger, and then behind Berger, Mika Salo. Now, those 3 are all going to be frustrated. They'd all love to find a way past that McLaren. I would think Häkkinen is probably holding them up to the tune of about half a second a lap.
And I know that Mika Salo has been told to curb his natural finish enthusiasm, and remember that this is a long race of attrition, and that a lot of people are going to drop out, and to just take it comparatively easy, Mika. Keep the car on the road, and at the end of the race you could and probably will be in the points. So, Häkkinen, Barrichello, Berger and Salo. That means to say McLaren, Jordan, Benetton and Tyrrell. And behind Salo is Heinz-Harald Frentzen, some 7.5 seconds behind. But this is the battle of the race, because Villeneuve, Hill and Schumacher are still first, second and third. Irvine is still 4th, and you're looking now at the battle for 5th, led by Mika Häkkinen, followed by the gold car of Rubens Barrichello.
And we're now approaching what's going to be a pretty intriguing part of this race, up to the time when the first of the pit stops may occur. If these drivers are going to be making 2 pit stops, one would have expected the first stop to be round about lap, probably if it was going to be an equal breakdown of the race, lap 18, but I suspect someone may pit rather earlier than that, perhaps lap 15, something like that. We're now on lap 13. Now, some scenarios are, if Williams are running enough fuel to do just 1 stop, that can enable them either to run through until round about lap 26, lap 27, or they may still elect to come in, particularly perhaps Damon Hill. There's no real reason, I don't think, why Jacques Villeneuve should come in any earlier, but Damon Hill may want to come in earlier to make that first stop shorter. Because he'd have some fuel still left in that tank, they could put a relatively small amount in to complement what was left in the tank to give him enough fuel to run along to lap 40. But it's my suspicion that we might see Michael Schumacher be the first to pit. From the performance of the cars, I really would not have expected him to be as close to Hill as he is, and the logical reason would be that the car is running lighter. So let's expect to see Michael Schumacher coming in first, and I would have thought in the next 3 or 4 laps for fuel.
Now you're looking back from Barrichello's car at Berger in 7th place and Mika Salo in the Tyrrell as they go into turn 1. There's the Austrian Gerhard Berger, ex-Ferrari, ex-McLaren, ex-ATS, ex-Benetton. He actually won Benetton's first Grand Prix in Mexico in 1986, and on braking he's getting closer to us. Very, very experienced. Jacques Villeneuve, meantime, is forcing on the pace. He's just done the fastest lap of the race, 1 minute 34.116, but still leads Damon Hill by 0.8 of a second. And Damon Hill is the same time ahead of Michael Schumacher. Eddie Irvine is losing time at the rate of a second a lap. He's now 11 seconds in 4th place behind Michael Schumacher. And there go Häkkinen, Barrichello, Berger and Salo, 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th. Not quite nose to tail, but if any one of them falters, the man behind will be passed. It's that close. Look at it.
Well, Villeneuve sets a new fastest lap once again. Let's just keep an eye on Barrichello there, right up behind Mika Häkkinen. Turn 13, that's when he could have gone by, but it's just so very, very difficult. I really can't get over how hard it is when you are following another car. You're both doing 185 miles an hour towards a corner. You can brake at perhaps only 70 or 80 meters away from that corner, and yet somehow you've got to just try and brake another 5 meters later to come by. It's a great thing to be able to do. Now, back to the race here. The pace is really quick, I must admit. 1 minute 34.1 was a new fastest lap from Jacques Villeneuve. And I find it hard to believe that, despite what I said earlier, that these Williamses can have enough fuel on to reach mid-distance. And if that's the case, then I would have thought each of these 3 drivers, and indeed most of the field, are going to be coming in between now lap 15 and then on to lap 20, somewhere in the next 5 laps for their first of what must surely be 2 stops.
And put yourself in the cockpit with them. The heat will be intense. They are wearing flame-proof underwear. They're wearing 3-layer overalls on top of it, crash helmets, balaclava helmets, heavy gloves. They're cocooned inside the cockpit even more than they were last year by these high cockpit sides. They've got the 700-plus horsepower racing away behind them, generating enormous heat. The G-forces are terrific. They are driving on the very, very narrow line between staying on the track at maximum speed and flying off it. And we saw what happened earlier on when flying off happens. And concentration has to be intense. It has to be maintained for over an hour and a half. The drivers have to be extremely fit, none fitter than the 3 who are ahead. Jacques Villeneuve, who is a diminutive driver, he's about Alain Prost size, only weighs 62 kilograms and is leading. There he is. We're looking back at Villeneuve. Is extremely fit, championship standard skier. Damon Hill has been putting in as much as 6 hours a day of fitness training, and his fat ratio is down to the absolute minimum. Michael Schumacher's always been that way, and there into the pits for the first stop comes Mika Salo on lap 17. So Salo in the Tyrrell, in from 10th position. Remember, he was stuck behind, and that's a retirement. That's one of the arrows stuck by the track. Sadly, it is Jos Verstappen, and he deserved a lot more than that because he was absolutely superb all through the familiarization sessions which we had on Thursday and the practice on Friday. There is no qualifying on Friday these days, and the qualifying yesterday, and Jos Verstappen started in 12th position on the grid in a very underfunded team. Now he's going to fail to finish the race. The retirements now Martin Brundle, who went out pretty early, and John Alesi, as a result of that, coming together with Eddie Irvine. And now Jos Verstappen to make the third out of the 18 starters. And Villeneuve leads, Hill second, Schumacher third, and there are still only 2.2 seconds between the first and third cars, with Irvine fourth, 14 seconds behind.
And Villeneuve takes another fastest lap. And the reason that this is happening in such a nice progressive sequence here, I think, is apart from the fact that Villeneuve is a great driver, is the fact that the tyres are consistent here. The tyres are relatively hard, and that means the cars don't have as much grip as they could have, but on the other hand, at least they don't go off. And by that we mean lose grip with more lapping. And indeed, some teams have said that they could actually go through the whole race without changing tyres, so low is the wear rate. And so as the wear rate is low, they don't go off, their performance doesn't deteriorate. Then, as the cars lap, the fuel load comes down by about 4 litres per lap, and every bit of weight that comes off should enable the car to go faster. And that's exactly what's happening for all these drivers, being led there by Jacques Villeneuve.
And I know Canada is watching this race, and Canada can rejoice at the brilliance of its son, Jacques Villeneuve, son of the great Gilles. And he's doing a sort of Nigel Mansell in reverse, because Nigel Mansell went to Indy racing and blew them all away to become the champion in his first year. And we've never had this happen before, an Indy driver come to Formula One and do as well as Villeneuve is. Now, Villeneuve, of course, is a very different kettle of fish to Michael Andretti, who did not shine for America when he came from Indy racing to Formula One. But Villeneuve is multilingual. He speaks a bit of Japanese, he speaks Italian fluently, he speaks French fluently, he speaks English, of course. He's a very calm, methodical chap. He actually lives in Monaco, so he doesn't have the commuting problem that Andretti imposed on himself. And Frank Williams, who let David Coulthard go to McLaren at the end of last season, has got a real find as a replacement in Jacques Villeneuve.
I must say, I'm deeply impressed by Michael Schumacher here. The Ferrari is totally new. It's a new team to him. To keep up with the Williams is remarkable, even if, as I suspect, he's running a lighter fuel load. I still think Schumacher will come into the pits first, but it's very, very close indeed. This is great racing.
And Ferrari are getting ready for a stop. Now, is it going to be Michael Schumacher? It could well be. You see, Michael Schumacher is not making any impression on Damon Hill ahead of him or Jacques Villeneuve, and he may well opt to come in and take his pit stop in the hope that it's a quicker one than Villeneuve and Hill will subsequently have, and which would give him an opportunity to pass them in the pits, as it were.
And Schumacher puts another fastest lap here. Schumacher is really pushing hard. That, to me, fits in with Schumacher coming into the pits. He's not going to make up any more ground there following Damon Hill. Now, what we need to look for when he comes into the pits, look for the strips of, for Ferrari's case, that red strip. It's not paint on the ground, it's abrasive strip. Now, Schumacher will be the best at making full potential of it, probably coming in extremely briskly in the last section, and then getting out quickly too. But we must also watch the time that he's stationary for. And if it's roundabout, as I suspect it'll be round about 9 or 10 seconds, then that will indicate the first of 2 stops. If it's more like 14 or more like 15, it could conceivably be 1, but I think it's virtually impossible.
And a mark of Schumacher's professionalism is in that in the practice sessions, he applies himself to working up the maximum speed for coming off the track into the pit lane. The pit lane is still part of the track until they cross a certain line, and obviously the quicker you can get off the track into the pit lane, the better your stop is going to be, the more chance you've got of catching the man in front when he comes in.
Now, last year, Benetton with Schumacher's pit stop strategy or pit stop routine was absolutely legendary. Let's just see if Schumacher and Ferrari together have managed to transfer that ability. How much was Schumacher? How much was Benetton? Let's see.
Schumacher into the pits, so this is it. Now Williams will obviously pull away. Eddie Irvine will go through into third position. That's the line. Now from now on, if Schumacher or anybody else exceeds 120 kilometres an hour, they are in trouble. So on the abrasive strips, Schumacher stops. The length of his pit stops as the mechanic cleans some debris out of the side pods will indicate to us how much fuel he's taking on, because that's the thing that takes longest. 12.9 seconds for Michael Schumacher, who stopped on lap 21 of the 58-lap Australian Grand Prix here at Melbourne, and allows Eddie Irvine up into third position. But Schumacher has rejoined the race in fourth place, ahead of the battle between Mika Häkkinen for fifth against Rubens Barrichello and Gerhard Berger. The three of them are still together, fourth, fifth and sixth, and down in seventh position is Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Oh, and Villeneuve really pushing it, which gives Damon Hill the opportunity to close a bit, although the gap had increased to 1 second. I know 1 second isn't very long, but it had consistently been of the order of 0.8 of a second, and Hill is pushing now, no doubt about it.
Absolutely, and that really was quite a moment from Jacques Villeneuve. I wonder if he's entirely happy with his car. He seems to have actually, or Hill seems to be much closer to him now. He's really all over the back of him. But I think that fuel stop that we saw from Ferrari, that is not up to Benetton standards yet, I don't think. But I think they can be blamed for that. 12.9 seconds is quite a long time for a two-stop strategy. I think that's the first of two stops. In fact, I'm absolutely sure it is. And I think this will enable the Williams drivers and the Williams team to pull away a bit. I think after the stops that they're going to make, and the question is now, will they stop in the next lap or two? Because if they don't, I think they may well go on until round about lap 27, lap 28, and make this into a one-stop race for the Williams team. We need to see what happens in the next couple of laps. If they don't stop now, I think they'll get to continue on and make it a one-stopper.
Now, here's a new challenge for Jacques Villeneuve, who is used to lapping people on ovals all the time. That's what he's been used to in the last 2 years. Champion rookie of Indy racing in 1994. He won Indianapolis last year and the championship. But lapping people in a Formula One race is a new experience to him. It's not new to Damon Hill. And Villeneuve is coming up behind tail enders now on lap 22 out of 58 in this fascinating race. Past goes Villeneuve. Damon Hill does the same thing and closes up in the process. Damon Hill now, the people who have stopped already as Villeneuve comes up to a McLaren, that's David Coulthard. Now Coulthard is in 12th position, so Villeneuve and Hill have lapped everybody up to 12th. The stoppers so far are Schumacher, Parnis, Sarlo, Frentzen, Deniz, Fisichella, Lamy have all come in, and now, because Villeneuve is having a bit of a problem getting past Coulthard, you can see that Damon Hill is getting closer and closer, and into the pits comes Eddie Irvine for his stop from third position, and this is lap 23. So Irvine stopping. Schumacher has already done so. Nice stop, exactly the right place, just in front of the lift to get the front of the car off the ground. There's one at the back as well. And remember, Schumacher's stop was 12.6 seconds. 12.9 seconds, I apologise, and so 11.7 seconds. That means to say that Eddie Irvine on that pit stop has gained a second and comes through. There is Irvine. He's now in 7th position, and the race order on lap 23 with Villeneuve and Hill still to come in, with Schumacher having done so, and Schumacher is now 30 seconds behind them, so they have just about got time to get in and get out before he arrives. It's Villeneuve leading Hill by 7/10. There is Damon Hill.
And importantly, there is, or significantly rather than importantly, there was David Coulthard behind. David Coulthard has obviously let the two Williams drivers through, but look how quickly he's falling back. It must be a very rueful David Coulthard, who was obviously would have been thinking that was me last year. dicing with Damon Hill, and now I'm being lapped by them within 23 laps.
Exactly, and the two Williams now come up to Heinz Harald Frentzen in the Sauber Ford V10. That will be the spare car, because remember, he stopped in his race car and turns in front of Damon Hill. That's not very helpful. Damon won't like that at all, and Villeneuve will, because it gives him a chance to ease away on account of the fact that Damon has still got to get past the Sauber, and does so on the inside now.
Now let's just see how quickly Damon Hill can close that gap. This is an interesting situation when a driver who's following another gets stuck behind, he loses some time, and we don't know how much quicker he could go, but let's follow this. It looks to me as if Damon may be able to close that gap relatively quickly, and if he does so, it will mean that he's capable of lapping faster than Villeneuve, and that Villeneuve was in fact holding him up.
Benetton are getting ready for a stop, and that means Gerhard Berger, of course. Lacey out of the race on lap 11 after colliding with Eddie Irvine. And we're on lap 24. You can see the two leaders. The gap between them is about 0.6 of a second. Williams-Renault leads, Williams-Renault second, and the Renault V10 engine, which has dominated Formula One for so long, thanks to the design genius of Bernard Dudo, is doing the same thing here. Gerhard Berger in the other Renault-powered car. The Benetton is in 6th position. Over the line, no change in the gap, and I do think that Damon Hill is just studying form, watching Villeneuve, conserving himself, conserving the car to make a push later on, but Villeneuve is superb.
So Berger about to come into the pits, but what we need to look for again is the length of that fuel stop. Two possibilities. Are Benetton making one stop, in which case it may well be around about 16, 17 seconds, and they'll need to put a lot of fuel in that car to get to the end of the race, or is it just a late first stop? If it's the latter, then they should only be stationary for about 10 seconds.
At the moment, it is looking very, very good indeed for Williams in the Constructors' Championship as Gerhard Berger comes into the pit lane. Now he has to slow down to a maximum of 120 k's, about 75 miles an hour. Otherwise, he will be brought in for a 10-second penalty. And incidentally, penalties now are going to be taken at the actual garage of the car which has transgressed for all sorts of reasons. I'll explain them if I've got time. Berger goes out. That's the quickest top stop we've had so far. Gerhard Berger in 9.1 seconds. And a credit to the Benetton team, because that's 2.5 seconds faster than Eddie Irvine and 3 seconds faster than Schumacher.
Well, with respect, I think the main reason for that is probably that Berger has literally taken on less fuel. Less fuel means less time, and that is definitely the first of two stops. There's no way they could have put on enough fuel to get to the end of the race. But this is very, very encouraging news for Williams, for Villeneuve and for Damon Hill, because now it is clear to me that they are just going to make one stop. They would have had some 110 litres of fuel on that car when they started the race. Now Schumacher would have accounted for the fact, as we surmised, that Schumacher was able to keep up. Schumacher's car would have been running in a configuration with less fuel that should have made it maybe 7 or 8 tenths of a second faster. Indeed it was. That's what kept him up. But what's going to be interesting is to compare lap times now that Schumacher is on his own. He's not being held up by anybody, and we'll have to have a look at that and see how it compares to the Williams cars. The Williams cars now must be very light. They must stop in another 4 laps, I would think, in about literally 3 or 4 laps time. And we also need to watch the fuel stops for Barrichello and Häkkinen too, because Barrichello and Häkkinen are both on one-stoppers. They will want... Barrichello will want, and he's into the pits now, he will want to get by. This could be a long stop. Let's just see. I think this will be the first, oh, well, in fact, just one stop. Let's see if he's going to put enough fuel in that. No, it's the first of 2. That's not enough fuel to get to the end of the race again, I don't believe. And 11.3 seconds. And he will want to be sure to get ahead of Häkkinen. That's probably why they've just done it this way. New tyres on. Let's see what happens when Häkkinen comes in.
So Katayama pursues Barrichello, followed by Olivier Panis, but in 5th position now as you watch Villeneuve crossing the line to complete 26 laps ahead of Damon Hill. But in 5th position now behind Schumacher and Häkkinen is Eddie Irvine, and he is gaining on the McLaren of Mika Häkkinen. Häkkinen's lapping about 3/10 of a second slower than Irvine, who is 4.5 seconds behind him. Jacques Villeneuve makes another fastest lap. Of course, the fuel load is coming down, 1:33.633 for Jacques Villeneuve, who leads Damon Hill by 1 second in time, and you can see how much in terms of track distance.
Yes, the fuel load's coming down, but the important thing too is that the tyres are staying up in terms of performance staying up, and that's why they can progressively chip away. And that must be, well, that's a McLaren. I suspect it might be David Coulthard actually, and I think it is David Coulthard. Yes, it is. Well, not a good debut for McLaren for David Coulthard. This will be one that he'll want to forget and concentrate on the next race in Brazil. But next interest is going to focus on the Williams pairings fuel stops, because a good stop from either of them could make the difference. And then we're just seeing Coulthard pulling into the pits there. Well, unless that's, yes, I sincerely hope it's him and not. Ah, well, he looks like he went straight on there. Now, I wonder what problem he had. He's probably come into the pits too quickly, and he's missed the entry. But then quite that wide, that should result in him being hauled into the garage into retirement. I'm not sure what the connection is. But the Williams crew are going to need to do an equal stop with both Villeneuve and Hill. And if Damon Hill's stop is just a little bit faster, and it needs to be less than 1 second faster than Jacques Villeneuve's stop, it's going to put Hill into the lead of the Australian Grand Prix.
But he's not there at the moment. It's still Jacques Villeneuve, just 24 years old, and this is his first Grand Prix. It bears saying again and again, because it is an astounding performance. I can only remember one driver in the history of Formula One winning his first Grand Prix, Giancarlo Baghetti in the Ferrari many years ago. I'm just desperately trying to remember which year it was while I talk to you. But if Villeneuve does it, and he's on target for doing it at the moment, he's going to make history. And I remember too that his great father Gilles won his first Grand Prix, not the first Grand Prix he ever drove in, but he won his first Grand Prix at Montreal in Canada, and what an emotional time that was. Mika Häkkinen is going to be coming in soon, and the race order is Villeneuve, Hill, Schumacher is 35 seconds behind them, Häkkinen is 17 seconds behind Schumacher, Irvine is 5th but not gaining anymore, 6th is Gerhard Berger, and that is the top 6 for World Championship points.
And Villeneuve, is that Hill going by? The Williams crew are ready for a stop. No, they're both out on the circuit, I beg your pardon. But they are now both 34 seconds, or rather Hill is 34 seconds ahead of Michael Schumacher. And what is going to be critical is for either of them to get in and get out of the pits ahead of Michael Schumacher. It's a long pit lane here. The speed limit is 120 kilometers per hour. It's going to be pretty close. It's obviously going to be important for them to get out ahead of Schumacher. Otherwise, Schumacher will control the race and could well, and almost certainly will, hold them up. It's going to be a very close call, but I think the Williams cars are far enough ahead to get out in front. One of them will be in at the end of this lap.
Well, they say if you try hard enough, you can remember everything. It was 1961 that Baghetti won for Ferrari, his first Grand Prix. Now, is this it? There are the two Williams. They're coming up to Katayama in the Tyrrell. This is Damon Hill. Are we going to see, from his point of view, Jacques Villeneuve peel off and go into the pits to take the first Williams stop? Because obviously they won't be coming in together, but you can be pretty sure that the next lap after somebody goes in, the other one will be into the pit lane. So Villeneuve past the Tyrrell, Hill past the Tyrrell, still nothing in it. Their lap times are to within 1/10 of a second. There is no doubt that Hill knows exactly what he's doing. There's equally no doubt that they go through again. Now, I was talking to the Goodyear technicians before this race began, and they said there is actually no need for anybody to make a stop for tyre change reasons. They have the B compound, which is the mid-hardness, softness measure, and they say they could easily go the whole race, although obviously it will benefit them to put new tyres on and get better grip while they're in for fuel.
Well, I'm a little bit surprised that one didn't come on that lap, come into the pits on that lap, but I can definitely assure you the Williams crew are ready, they are waiting, and indeed I can see the tyre covers being taken off the tyres. So I once again say that definitely one of these two will be coming in, and the thing to look for is the length of the stop. The following lap, the other Williams car will come in, I'm sure of that too. And what's also interesting is that last year Benetton had quite an advantage at many circuits, such as this, when one stop was deemed to be the best solution, because their fuel tank was enough to allow the car to go 3 or 4 laps beyond the mid-distance point. Williams's was not, and they had to stop exactly at midpoint, and that gave Benetton an advantage. Williams have made a larger fuel tank now, so they should be better able to compete with any strategy benefits that Benetton or Ferrari might be able to apply.
And into turn 13 in this 16-corner circuit. Turn 14, 15, the next corner, somebody will peel off, and it's race leader Jacques Villeneuve who peels off, and past him as Villeneuve turns up towards his garage, and we're riding with him now, goes Damon Hill to take the lead of the Australian Grand Prix. Schumacher will not go through before Villeneuve unless Villeneuve has a real problem. Now, the quickest top stop we've had so far is 9.1 seconds, but Villeneuve will be putting in less fuel, of course, because he's done 31 laps now. What am I saying? Because the seconds are ticking away. Now there's a problem with the left front, and that is a dreadful stop for Villeneuve, because if Damon Hill comes in on the next lap, as we expect him to, and takes less than 17 seconds, he will certainly take the lead. And if he doesn't take less than 17 seconds, there will be something very wrong with the Williams procedures.
Well, in fact, the fuel stop should have been a lot longer than the 10 seconds, because this was just the one stop that Williams were going to make. They had to put in some 110 litres. So I think a good stop would have been about 15 or 16 seconds. I think Villeneuve lost a second or two. Now, McLaren are going to make one stop here now for Hakkinen. Let's see how long he is stationary for, because this should give us a pretty good idea as to what a one-stop, 110-litre fill-up should be able to do. Well, the fuel's going in, the tyres are done. Interesting that they put the car back on the ground to complete the stop. Well, that was 14.2 seconds. That will be his only stop, and therefore I think the implication is Damon Hill will do a stop in around about 15 or 16 seconds, and Damon Hill, after he comes out from his stop, I think will be in the lead of the Grand Prix.
Hakkinen joins in front of the battle, and Damon Hill is up amongst the traffic now. There he is. McLaren, Minardi, with Olivier Panis doing his best. Olivier Panis is in 9th position, and the order now is Hill, Villeneuve having stopped, Schumacher having stopped, Irvine 4th, Berger 5th, Hakkinen is 6th, and everybody except Damon Hill has made one tyre stop.
Well, that's frustrating there for Damon Hill, because he's being held up. He's not being able to make use of a clear bit of track as he would like to, and if that call compromises him by 2 or 3 seconds, that could negate the advantage that we think he will get when he makes a shorter pit stop. It may be that he won't make a shorter pit stop either. We shouldn't be too sure about that.
Now, Damon Hill, remember, in the European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring last year, precipitately tried to get past a Lacey's Ferrari when Hill was in fact just about to come in for a stop, went off the track and lost the race, in fact had to retire. So he's avoided doing that in this situation, but then he wasn't battling against Sean Lacey either. So lap 32, Hill is the man. He's leading by 38 seconds, and in he comes now. Villeneuve's time was 17.6 seconds. Damon Hill just carefully driving in over the line. Now he has to do not more than 120 miles an hour, looking for his pit crew and the jack in front, and he stops now perfectly. 17.6 seconds is his target. 17.6 seconds. The fuel is going in. The wheels have been changed. The nuts have been tightened.
Look at the different technique. Williams don't lower the car to the ground. Well, I'd have rather seen the end of Williams' pit stop than the Ligier. 13.5, it's a longer stop. It's a longer stop. This should let Villeneuve, let's have a look. We can see Hill comes out of the pit lane, Villeneuve comes up. It's going to be very, very close into the first corner.
And that Damon Hill takes the lead and stays ahead of Jacques Villeneuve. Well, you can't be much closer than that. And Villeneuve realises that now he's got to go for it because Damon Hill's tyres are not as warm as Villeneuve's are. There's not a lot of difference in it, and Villeneuve fights and retakes the lead. Fantastic! Absolutely incredible!
Well, Villeneuve's tyres were warm, but now that's Schumacher in for his second stop there. This will be a relatively short one, I think, unless he has a problem. It seems rather early for a second stop, I must say. I wonder if he's got some problem. He has. Look, they're taking off the nose cone. Front wing, the whole assembly comes off in one, and he's got a problem. It's not a great surprise. This is Ferrari's first race with this very new car, but that was superbly aggressive, forceful, but clean driving, not just from Villeneuve, but also Damon Hill sensibly let him through. I think that he was obviously eager not to have any kind of collision between the two Williams cars. Schumacher's talking to them. He's obviously got a problem with the car. This looks like being the end of Schumacher's race, I think.
Yes, we're not at all surprised if it is, because as I said earlier on, Ferrari were very late getting the new 310 with its V10 engine ready. They had very little testing. Schumacher himself has been deliberately downplaying his World Championship chances. He said he would be happy if he won 3 races this year. Well, he's clearly not going to win this one, although his teammate Eddie Irvine is up into 3rd place now. Villeneuve and Williams and Hill tail to nose in the Williams Renaults. Irvine is 30 seconds behind them. Berger is up into 4th place. Hakkinen is back into 5th place. Mika Salo in the Tyrrell is in the points. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is 7th. Parnis is 8th. Schumacher down to 9th position, a lap adrift. He's a lap behind, and out of the race goes Michael Schumacher. Now, I really am guessing, that's exactly what he did on the familiarisation day at that very corner, and he just managed to scramble off, so he knows his way back. He's obviously overshot the corner. Now, here's a replay of it. Now, was that a brake failure or was it a Schumacher failure? I certainly don't think it was the latter.
I think he's got a brake problem with that Ferrari. That right front wheel locked relatively easily. There was no wheel locking from the other 3 wheels, and he had the front of the car off. I suspect Michael's got a brake problem. I think he'll be back in the pits, and he's cruising in. Eddie Irvine, his teammate, goes by. That's what happened. But again, look how the way that Schumacher, faced with a drama like that, and he still would have been braking from 140 odd miles an hour, he still manages to think about how to avoid having the accident when he goes off the track, steers the car back, sees where the gravel is, runs straight over the gravel, and then Villeneuve is... Oh, Damon Hill is all over the back of Villeneuve. There's obviously a lot of fraught competition between these two. We didn't see an incident earlier on, but Villeneuve was a second ahead of Hill. I wonder if being behind Panis, that's Olivier Panis and Ligier that's ahead. I think there's been an incident that we didn't see somewhere that's let Hill get right back in contention with Villeneuve.
The gloves are off. Their teammates are great mates, and off goes Villeneuve, and he gets on the course back in front of Hill, and he manages to block his teammate because that was Damon's opportunity. He wasn't able to take it, but now Hill can push very hard indeed, and he's trying to take him on the outside. He nearly goes off on the inside of the corner. What a sensational scrap. And remember, this is for the lead between teammates.
Well, I think that was Villeneuve driving over the top there. I have to say, I think that was too forceful. Villeneuve deliberately drove in towards the side. And let's have another look here. Villeneuve gets wide, he scrabbles, he gets it very wide indeed. He's on the grass, he gets back on the track. He's now going a lot slower than Hill. Hill then has the momentum. Now watch Villeneuve literally try and drive, swerve across. Look at Villeneuve, he's moving across to the right-hand side. He's blocking the right, so Hill has to lift off. Hill goes to the left. Now let's see what Villeneuve does now. He moves back across, he's moving to the left. I'd like to have seen that a little bit longer just to see exactly what happened there, but I think that was too forceful from Jacques Villeneuve. That's really going to have wound up Damon Hill. Fundamentally, Jacques Villeneuve made the mistake. He recovered well, but Damon Hill had the right to use his superior momentum to go by.
I think that was an incredible repetition of what happened between Schumacher and Hill at Adelaide the year before last. Damon then dived up inside Schumacher only to be knocked off. And it looked to me as though Damon was actually deciding that he was going to stay where he was, because Schumacher was coming right back in Villeneuve was coming right back in front of him. But my goodness, it's irrelevant because they are absolutely at it now. And this is a race on their own, way out in front of Irvine. 25 seconds, only one Ferrari left, and that's Irvine. He's carrying the Maranello hopes on his shoulders because Michael Schumacher has retired.
Well, that manoeuvre spoke volumes about Jacques Villeneuve's personality. This man is not to be messed with. That's what he's saying there. He made that point in a very low-key way before the race, and there we have seen the evidence. It's one thing talking about it, it's another thing doing it. And it's only people like Schumacher, but the other person that would have driven like that would have been Ayrton Senna. Senna would never have given up. He would have done whatever he could to stay ahead. But what's different, possibly, and we'll have to see, is the attitude of the organisers, the attitude of the FIA. What will be tolerated in terms of what is reasonable racecraft and what is deliberate blocking or forcing off the road.
Looked fair enough to me, no problem, but Villeneuve's car looks very light at the front. He's right on the edge at the present moment. If he goes any harder, he's in danger of sliding off. Hill looks very within himself to me, steadier, but then Hill has got a lot more Grand Prix, like 51 of them behind him already, and this is Villeneuve's first drive. We are seeing today a new superstar in Formula One. Straight off, first time, Jacques Villeneuve. He and Damon Hill are now coming up. They're going to have this lapping, a tail-ender problem that they've had before. This is going to be an opportunity for Damon Hill. I didn't see quite who it was in front of them. He just disappeared out of the picture as I was looking at it. It's Olivier Panis, who is in 9th position. Olivier Panis, the Frenchman, is going to be caught and lapped by the two leaders. They've lapped everybody up to Olivier Panis, who is 9th. What the order is: Villeneuve Hill, Irvine 3rd, Berger 4th, 41 seconds behind the leaders as they come up to Panis. Hakkinen is 5th, Frentzen is in 6th position, Sarlo is 7th, and Panis is in 8th place. Soon to be caught, and Damon Hill will be trying to get right under the wing of Villeneuve's Williams, leaving himself room to jink to the side if Villeneuve is held up. And Panis himself is closing up on somebody. So there's going to be a 4-car traffic jam here on different laps. Anything could happen.
Absolutely, and this really is fantastic hard-charging racing. There's no doubt about that. And traffic could well make the difference here. So, and Panis, would have been nice if you let Damon go through there, Olivier. Well, Jacques Villeneuve still out in front. This is a real needle match stuff. And again, one of the good things that we've got here at Melbourne is the fact that these tyres are durable. These Goodyear tyres are hard enough, they're durable enough to allow the drivers to really fight with the cars, to slide them, drift them, go off the track, come back on without losing performance. And if they hadn't been like that, we wouldn't see this degree of forceful driving, certainly in terms of sliding the cars without losing performance, without losing lap time.
And it's getting harder and harder for Villeneuve and Hill, of course, because as they come up to lap people, the next chap that they are going to lap will be going faster than the one that they have lapped, because he was ahead of him. And their target next is Mika Salo in the Tyrrell, who was about 7 seconds ahead of the battle for the lead. Salo is lapping at about 1:39. Villeneuve and Hill are lapping in about 1:36. So in about 3 laps time, maybe less, they'll be right with him. So look down Albert Park Lake on the right as they go into turn 9. Now swing left. This is the 180 mile-an-hour section, and they're on lap 38 out of 58. And it's a race that's held our attention all the time, primarily because of this wonderful scrap. They've never been more than a second apart. And remember, Damon Hill and Villeneuve fought as they came out of the pits, and Villeneuve scrambled past. Hill took him, Villeneuve took him again. Great stuff at the lead.
Now, I think it could be pit stop time soon. Not for these two. They're going to run to the end. But for Eddie Irvine, he made his first pit stop on round about lap 22. Eddie Irvine is charging. He's the fastest man on the circuit at the moment, but I think his car is pretty light. That first stop, if we remember from Eddie Irvine, it wasn't as long as Schumacher's, and I'd expect to see Irvine come in the next couple of laps. He is some 21 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger in 4th place. Berger's 4th, Irvine is 3rd. And that will mean that at the stop, at least, if Irvine stops before Berger, Irvine will move ahead. But I believe that Berger, too, is going to have to make a second stop.
Hill is right with Villeneuve again. He's showing him the nose of the Williams, reminding him he's still there. That's Eddie Irvine in 3rd place. If you've just joined the Australian Grand Prix and wonder why it's running 25 minutes late, the answer is that at the 3rd corner of the first start, Martin Brundle went off with enormous velocity into the wall. The car, the Jordan Peugeot, which Martin was driving for the first time, was literally broken in half. Incredibly, Martin was unhurt. Johnny Herbert was involved but was unhurt. Ukyo Katayama had stalled on the grid. Pedro Lamy had had to start from the pit lane, and David Coulthard was also involved with the collision but is okay, although he's now out of the race. And the race restarted 25 minutes later, and after the first start, where Villeneuve magnificently took the lead, Damon Hill, who'd started 2nd on the grid, was passed by both Eddie Irvine and Schumacher, went down to 4th, so couldn't have been too unhappy about the fact that there was a restart, although he wouldn't have wanted it to have happened at the expense of Martin Brundle. And at the second restart, the battle between Villeneuve and Hill started, and it's continued ever since. We're on lap 40. And Martin Brundle is with Tony Jardine.
I'm with Martin Brundle now. Martin, good to see you, and in good shape, fortunately, after that big accident. What happened from your perspective?
My car was fine. I had a very good start. Flat in 6th, just sort of thinking about braking for turn 3. And the 3 cars in front of me all seemed to tangle and slow very quickly and veer across to my side of the track, and the closing speed was so enormous that no way I could avoid them. Car went into the air and went straight to the scene of the accident.
Tough car and a tough driver.
Car stood up very well. Yeah, I don't think we'll be using that one again, but no, I was absolutely fine. You know, when they're very spectacular, those kind of accidents, but it's the sudden stop that hurts rather than sort of when all the bits are flailing off. At least the energy is being dissipated.
We saw your fitness. You ran up and down the pit lane, presumably looking for Sid Watkins, Professor Sid Watkins.
Yeah, the doctors checked me here in the pits. I felt fine, but it was overruled and I had to find Sid, but nobody knew where he was. So I ran from sort of one end of the pits to the other and finally found him. But I think he saw me running towards him and he decided I looked fairly fit anyway. Great effort, brave effort as well. At the end, it all came to naught. It did, yeah. I started from the pit lane. My brakes and tyres are very cold. And I caught Diniz having started from the pits, and he braked very, very early. And I just had no stopping power, and I just bumped into the back of him and lost the engine. It was all very silly. Well, great to see you're okay, and you live to fight another day. Thanks very much for talking to us, Martin. Thanks.
What an incredibly calm and phlegmatic man Martin Brundle is, as you watch Heinz-Harald Frentzen exit the pit lane after his 2nd stop. Salo has stopped twice, Parnis has stopped twice, Frentzen has stopped twice, Diniz has stopped twice, Lamy has stopped 3 times, and so has Michael Schumacher, who is now retired. Martin Brundle is out of the race, so is Alesi, so is Verstappen, so is Coulthard, so is Rubens Barrichello, and on lap 41 out of 58, and I'm expecting a real grandstand finish at this Australian Grand Prix. It is Villeneuve still leading Hill by less than a second. And we've seen that Jacques Villeneuve is not only prepared to fight back, but that he's very, very difficult to get by in the first place. And Benetton are getting ready for a pit stop, another pit stop for Gerhard Berger, who has already stopped once. His teammate Jean Alesi out of the race a long time ago, having collided in controversial circumstances with Eddie Irvine's Ferrari. And Irvine is running well at 3rd.
Now, this could be interesting because Berger's in 4th place. This will be his 2nd and last stop. He's 30 seconds ahead of Mika Häkkinen in the McLaren. But Mika, I believe, has made the only stop he's going to make. I think it was a very, very good stop from McLaren. And I think Häkkinen is doing an outstanding job, I must say. There's no doubt. The McLaren has been no match for the Williamses, the Ferraris, or the Benettons here. But when we see, yes, the Benetton team are all ready, but the crucial thing is, will Berger, there he is, will he get out ahead of Mika Häkkinen? Because if he doesn't, he might have a hard job getting by him.
A pretty unhappy race for David Coulthard. He's with Tony Jardine.
David, not a great first race of the season for you. What happened in that early melee?
Well, obviously in the first start, I made quite a good start off the grid, but then going down to the second corner, I think I got touched from behind because it made me fishtail out into the path of Martin, and it was pretty frightening when I saw him go flying over the top upside down.
And what happened finally to put you out of the race?
I had a problem with the throttle sticking slightly and eventually just drove me off the circuit, so it was the safer thing to do to park the car.
Not a great debut for the new McLaren Mercedes this season. You're hoping for better in Brazil. Do you think you can make up the deficit?
Yeah, I'm sure we can make up some of the deficit. You know, we didn't have much testing in Estoril before the start of the season, and we only tested that circuit. So we'll go to Silverstone and try and see if we can work on the balance.
Thanks very much for talking to us, David.
12 of the 18 starters are still running on lap 42 out of 58, and to be quite honest, that's more than I expected. And Villeneuve and Hill are still separated by less than a second and still lead Eddie Irvine, who's actually catching them by 18 seconds. Irvine is lapping quicker at the present moment, marginally.
Now look at those two Williams cars and see how much more oil there is over the back of Damon Hill's wing. A clean wing for Jacques Villeneuve, he's been in front. That wing of Damon Hill's has got yellow all over it, and that means that his visor will have been exposed to that same amount of oil, and that'll be obstructing his vision. In comes Eddie Irvine. Now Irvine is some 46 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger. This is his second stop. There's no real drama. He's going to maintain third place, I think, providing his Ferrari can run to the end of the race. He won't be able to challenge the Williams cars, and nor will he be able to be threatened, I think, by Berger. 10.8, good stop. Excellent stop there. Wheel spin goes down. Irvine exits the pits.
And Eddie Irvine, if he stays where he is, can be very, very proud of himself and very pleased with himself, because he out-qualified Michael Schumacher, the double world champion, for their first drive for Ferrari, both of them, for very special reasons, admittedly, but nevertheless he started in front of Schumacher. Schumacher has had to retire, and it looks as though Eddie Irvine, with, 16 laps left to go of this 3.275 mile track, is going to finish in third position. There's no question, therefore, about that. There's not much of a question about fourth, although Berger and Häkkinen are only separated in third and fourth places by about 6 seconds. Häkkinen may be able to catch Gerhard Berger, I rather doubt it. Mika Salo looks as though he's going to finish in the points in the new Tyrrell, a vast improvement on last year's car. But this is the question. And what could be a better question? It's going to be who wins the first Australian Grand Prix at Melbourne, as Villeneuve and Hill again start to close on tail enders. Pedro Lamy is one of them, and Pedro Diniz, I think, is another. There's two slow men. They've got a battle of their own. Yes, it is Lamy, and they've got a battle of their own, so they will be trying to watch each other, and they won't necessarily see Villeneuve and Hill.
Indeed.
But with Villeneuve going past, and Damon Hill does the same thing. Lamy courteously saw them and moved over.
Indeed, and this is where Damon needs to be right on the tail of Villeneuve, because if Villeneuve so much as falters, Hill needs to be close enough to pounce to be able to try and get by. He was too far away then. As it happened, there was no opportunity anyway. But he's seen from Villeneuve's driving before that Villeneuve is a much harder driver than anyone apart from Michael Schumacher that he's been dicing with before. He knows how the rules are written in terms of Villeneuve's book, and he's going to make sure, I'm sure, that when he gets another opportunity, he won't be quite as gentlemanly as he was the last time when Villeneuve came by around the outside of him.
Well, it's Mika Salo that they're catching now. I had forgotten that I forecasted in 3 laps time they would be with him, and they are. There's Mika Salo, and he's lapping at about 1 minute 35.6, which is just over a second slower than they are. But that's not much of a margin, although Salo is alone on the track. Mika Häkkinen is 7.6 seconds ahead of him. Salo will see them. The Finn is very experienced. He's a courteous driver, and I've little doubt that he'll move over and let them through, because there would be no advantage to him from not doing so. Well, you watch that and listen to Tony Jardine while he tells us what happened to Michael Schumacher.
Yes, I've been trying to listen to Michael Schumacher, been in the usual rugby scrum at the back of Ferrari around the world champion. It was brake failure, it was through lack of fluid, and they did try to top it up. There wasn't any left in the reservoirs at all. But Michael Schumacher was very optimistic about the car's performance. He was happy to stay with the Williams, he said, but depending on their strategy, if they were on a two-stop strategy, that wasn't too bad. And he said they got 3 weeks now to work on the reliability of the new Ferrari before Brazil. So he went away with a smile on his face.
Good news for everybody, especially Ferrari enthusiasts. Good news for Villeneuve as he passes Salo, who stays wide and let him through. And thank you, Mika Salo. Well done. That's a gentlemanly act. He stayed wide and let Damon Hill through. So the battle for the lead has not been interfered with by... He's not a tail-ender. He's in the points. But now the two flying leaders, Villeneuve and Hill, have lapped everybody up to Mika Häkkinen, who is in 5th place. And off goes a tear strip from Villeneuve's visor to give him better vision.
Yes, I'm sure when Michael Schumacher was following along the two Williams cars for that first third of the race, he must have been wondering, are these guys going to be stopping when I am at 1/3 distance, in which case we're looking in pretty good shape, or have they got enough fuel on to go halfway, in which case it's not so clever? Well, the latter was the answer, and that's why they have to go away and find some more time. But Jacques Villeneuve is being mighty impressive. There is no doubt about that. I think what's really impressed is that whilst I think he was a bit naughty in blocking Damon when he made that mistake, that is really hard, determined, ruthless driving, and it's that level of commitment and level of fight that goes to winning world championships. And I think in Villeneuve we have indications that there is somebody who could really give Michael Schumacher a run for his money. If they get in a similar dicing situation, it's going to be fascinating to see who comes out on top that time.
And Villeneuve's just gone round half a second quicker than Damon Hill. He's extended his lead a bit. And are there any team orders between Villeneuve and Hill? There are not. The only thing that they will have been told is not to take each other off. Because the constructor, whilst he's interested in the Drivers' Championship, is even more interested in the Constructors' Championship. And Williams are on a solid 16 points potentially now, as Villeneuve now and Hill now go through into lap 47 out of 58. Now, Ferrari will get points from Irvine, Benetton will get points from Berger, McLaren will get points from Häkkinen, Tyrrell will get points from Salo, but no team at the moment, apart from Williams, looks like getting two cars home in the top points scoring 6 positions, and to finish first and second is going to give Williams a very comfortable cushion when they go to Brazil for the next Grand Prix.
Well, with 12 laps to go now, it looks to me as if Hill's beginning to give up the fight. He's just slipping back, although actually he's just closed it again now. As we can see, actually, he has pulled it back. That figure, or those figures, mean that he was 1.3 seconds behind Hill, and it was to that gap that I was referring. However, at that third of the way around the circuit point, he closed it back up to 1 second. So let's just hope that Damon can summon up some more energy. And of course, the difficult thing, if not virtually impossible thing, certainly considering how hard a driver Villeneuve is, will be for Hill to get by. He's been driving this race in difficult conditions, and by that I mean that he's been following along another car within a second for virtually all of these 46 laps, and that's not a comfortable place to be, because the turbulence from the airflow, you've got the racket from the car's engine ahead, you've got the fact that you can't see, you're slightly unsighted, and then on top of all of that, you've got also the fact that from the Williams car of Villeneuve, we know there's a bit of oil spray coming out the back of it. I don't think there's anything to be concerned about in terms of reliability for Villeneuve's car, although he did have a new engine for this race after a warm-up problem, but that will have been splattered across the front of Hill's car. We can see it. Hill will have the rip-offs on his visor, sure, but he may well have used those up by now.
Well, Jacques Villeneuve was the first man to start his first Grand Prix from pole position since 1972. Is he going to be the first man to win his first Grand Prix since 1961? Either achievement would be terrific. Both of them would be absolutely incredible. And as I said, this is a new superstar. We're on lap 48 now, They're remorselessly reeling off the miles and the laps. The weather conditions remain perfect. There are 11 runners left out of the 18 that started. Far more than most people, certainly me, expected. Villeneuve, Hill, Irvine, Berger, Hakkinen are on the same lap. Salo, who is 6th, is 1 lap behind. Then it's Parnis 7th, Frenson 8th, Katayama 9th, Rosset is 10th, and Deniz is 11th.
Now this will be interesting. We saw Damon Hill drop back to 1.5 seconds behind Jacques Villeneuve. I felt due to traffic, and I'm sure it was. We saw them go past the others, Salo, etc. But let's just see if he can close that gap. He hadn't done on the last sector. It was 1.6 and it was 1.5, maybe by a tenth. But by the end of this lap, we'll see what Damon can do in terms of hauling himself back on terms with Villeneuve. But the other thing is he doesn't want to get too close unless there's some traffic ahead. I think there's more oil on the back of that Williams wing, actually. And I think the difference in colour between those two wings is accentuating. And I do begin to wonder if there is a bit more oil loss, or maybe it's hydraulic fluid loss from Villeneuve's Williams. We can't see anything actually out of the back of the car, but that's where it's come from Damon's point of view. Reliability is now the key. 10 laps to go to the end of this race. Williams have a pretty good reputation now for reliability. It wasn't too good for the first part of last year, but this year's car is not all new. It's an evolution of last year's FW17, so it should run to the finish without the problems that we're seeing in so many cases here.
Damon Hill pulled off another tear strip there, which indicates that his vision is being obscured. Jacques Villeneuve had to stop with earlier today with a hydraulic problem. So the Renault engine seems to be running well enough. It wasn't an engine problem, but visually Hill is getting closer. This gap keeps on going up to 1.4 seconds. We're on lap 49 now, coming up to the 50s, and there are 58 laps in this race. Irvine is going to finish in 3rd position, but he's dropping back all the time. He's losing about half a second a lap to the two Williams Renaults at the present moment, and he's some 53 seconds behind the leaders. But just look at the oil on that rear wing and compare of Damon Hill's Williams and compare it, and there is definitely smoke coming out of the back of Villeneuve's car. Look at it. You can see it now. You can see the haze, and Damon Hill is getting it. Now this accounts for it. Whether he's got any oil on his tyres or not, I don't know. I rather doubt it from the way he's hanging on. But Damon Hill is probably got a very severe vision problem. Villeneuve will be hanging on desperately. The engineers from Renault in the garage of the Williams team will know exactly what the situation is, because they have telemetry from the engine which is telling them what is happening to it. It's sending messages all the time about temperature, about oil consumption and many, many other things. So the fact that Villeneuve is racing on indicates to me that he hasn't got an engine problem, but then it wasn't an engine problem that stopped him this morning. It was a hydraulic problem. Could it be a repetition of the same thing? Lap 50 of the Australian Grand Prix, the first one of Melbourne, the first one of 1996. If the rest of the season turns out like this race, we're in for a feast of excitement for the rest of the year. So, Villeneuve passed the powerhouse, the basketball stadium, up to turn 13, underneath the bridge, down into the last 3 corners, the right at turn 14, the left, this is it, at turn 15. Then the Prost corner, named after the 4 times world champion, who is here as a consultant to McLaren, and through to complete another lap. Now the gap was 0.8 seconds, and they go over the line, and you can see that Hill has closed from 1.2 to 1.028. But it might as well be 10 seconds for all the good it's doing him at the moment.
Certainly there's oil vapour coming out of the back of the Williams car, and there has been, but it may well be too that part of the reason that Damon Hill's rear wing looks so yellow is from the sand and dust thrown up when Villeneuve went off the track earlier on. But I still think it's increasing, and at this stage we've actually got a pretty comfortable cushion for the Williams drivers. They're now 54 seconds ahead of Eddie Irvine. Damon will be looking at the back of that car. He will be desperately hoping that Villeneuve's got a problem. He hasn't enjoyed being pipped to pole position, but he's driven very well. It has to be said that Hill has been right up there. They've been sparring throughout the weekend. They've been alternating being at the top of the times from one session to the next, and we're going to have a very close battle, I'm sure, between these two for the remainder of the season. This is a track, though, it must be said, that might actually favour Villeneuve. Although it's his first Grand Prix, the fact is that no driver had any previous circuit knowledge. Now, when they go on to the next circuit at Brazil and Interlagos and Argentina, then he'll, like most of the other drivers, will actually have prior circuit knowledge. So we may see him actually benefit.
Bit of a dilemma for Damon Hill as a good team man. If he feels he could scramble past Villeneuve, he might be tempted to try, but then he knows what happened when he tried that with Schumacher last year, and he also knows that if he stays where he is, the team will get 16 World Championship points for the Constructors' Championship. This is lap 52, and Hill is now down to less than half a second behind Villeneuve. The time really is irrelevant. He's within sight of him. He can see underneath his rear wing. He can see his gearbox. He's pushing very, very hard in the hope that Villeneuve is going to have a problem.
And short of actually having an overtaking opportunity, that is as close as Damon Hill can physically get to Jacques Villeneuve. If he goes any closer than that gap, that 0.3, 0.4 of a second, he loses the airflow, the smoothness of the airflow to his car, and then he will lose downforce. His car will slide across the road, particularly at the front. Those front wings on the car rely on clean air, undisturbed air, to produce their full level of downforce. And so he's really, this is, I think, why we see the gap slightly wax and wane. And one of the reasons, I think Damon drops back a bit. He has a bit of a rest. It's hard work, as I've said before, following that closely behind. Has a rest and then has a bit of a charge to show that he can do it. He'll want to show that to the team. He'll want to show also to Jacques Villeneuve that he can do it. He's got the superior pace. Indeed, we saw Villeneuve on the main pit straight, look in his mirrors, watch his head on that main straight. It cocks to one side. He wants to keep a check on where Hill is, because you can be sure that if he thinks he's too close, Jacques will move across and take the inside line into that corner, that turn one. That is the most vulnerable place, I think, for Jacques at the moment.
If Canada in general and Quebec in particular is not on the edge of its seat, I do not know what has to happen to excite it. This is an incredible situation. First time, and Villeneuve starts from pole position. There is the maple leaf on his signal board, which has been shown to him, and not only starting from pole position, but potentially winning his first Grand Prix. This is lap 53. After that, lap 54, 55, 56, 57, 58. Has Damon Hill got anything in reserve? Can he push hard enough to get past? And now Villeneuve is up to Katayama, who is in 9th place. Villeneuve goes past Katayama. News from Tony Jardine at the Williams pit.
Yes, the Renault engineers in here are quite concerned, as is Patrick Head, who's been in to see them and talk to them. They're monitoring the engine's progress very carefully. But interestingly enough, they've just shown Villeneuve the slow sign on his board. Whether that's to preserve the engine or let Damon pass or not, I don't know.
I know I've seen more smoke. I saw a distinct plume of smoke come out of the back of Villeneuve's car then, probably as he backed off. Damon Hill will have seen it too. What a dilemma for Villeneuve. Never mind Damon, and this is it. They're showing the slow board to Villeneuve and Damon Hill senses his opportunity and goes for it. And Villeneuve cuts him off. Hill goes again. And this is lap 53 being completed. Slow, say. And is he going to ignore it? Is he going to be a good team man and obey it? And if he does, Damon Hill will go through and win.
Well, the fact is, at the moment, he is ignoring it. Certainly has done so far. Now, this is the crucial bit. No, he lets him through. Surely, yes. Jacques Villeneuve lets Damon Hill through. He concedes the lead. He knows that he's got a problem with the car.
Bitter goal for Jacques Villeneuve, who was on a magnificent trip to win his first Grand Prix. But hopefully he can at least back off now, preserve his engine, because he's 57 seconds ahead of Eddie Irvine on lap 54 out of 58. But Damon Hill, the man who finished second to Michael Schumacher in the World Championship last year and the year before, could be about to equal the Grand Prix record of his great double world champion father, Graham Hill, who won 14 races. Damon has won 13. If he wins 14, this will be the breaking of a psychological barrier for him. And a very, very emotional time for him, his mother Betty, and his sisters Bridget and Samantha.
Now we can see Villeneuve dropping back quite quickly now from Hill. That's because he will be desperate too to preserve his car. He needs to do the next 3 laps to get to the end of the race. He is 55 seconds ahead of Eddie Irvine, which is a huge margin, and therefore he can afford to slow up by, well, 5, 10, 15 seconds a lap, just to make sure he can do whatever he can to make sure that, from Williams' point of view and for his own, this is a 1-2 and at least a second place on the rostrum for Villeneuve.
In a battle-stained Williams-Renault. My heart goes out to Villeneuve. He's driven a wonderful race, but there's a lot more in him because the Canadian is only 24 years old to Damon Hill's 35. Villeneuve is one of the youngest drivers in the race. Barrichello is younger than he is, and Fisichella is too, but that's the only two. So to be where he is now and to have done what he has done now, not only in Grand Prix racing here today, but the Indianapolis series over the last 2 years, indicates that this is a great, great young driver following in the footsteps of his great father, Gilles.
Absolutely, we've got a tremendous season in store for us with these two. Williams, I think, will continue to be the head of the field, but I think mention must be made of the superb effort from Mika Häkkinen. Häkkinen is in 5th place. He's just 12.9 seconds behind Gerhard Berger in the Benetton. A good day for Finland too, because his compatriot Salo is 16 seconds behind in the Tyrrell. And Häkkinen, as we will recall, had that dreadful accident at Adelaide. He still does not look absolutely right. He does not feel absolutely right. He admitted that to me himself. He knew that race fitness was going to be a bit of a problem, but certainly he's managed to use his determination to force it through. And when I spoke to him about how he felt, he said, now I don't take so many risks, he said. He said, I now only take a risk every other lap, not every lap. So he's still got his sense of humour.
3 laps to go for Damon Hill, and we've heard from the Williams pits that it is indeed failing oil pressure that has delayed Jacques Villeneuve. But it's very unusual for Renault. Indeed, I can't remember when Renault last had an engine problem. Very, very unusual indeed. But this is a new V10 3-litre engine. Mercedes have got a new engine, Yamaha have got a new engine, Ferrari have got a new engine, and Renault are no exception. They've dramatically modified their car from last year, and Villeneuve is slowing right down now. He's gone from about 1 minute 36 to 1 minute 44, and if he goes a lot slower, and I do actually mean a lot slower because he's only got 2 laps, that man will catch him. And that man is Eddie Irvine, but he's 43 seconds behind, and something terribly dramatic, like stopping or coming almost to a standstill, has got to happen to Villeneuve.
Absolutely, and in these situations, you know, even if the temperature was right off the clock and it had no oil pressure, understandably and logically, Villeneuve will continue to drive that Williams for as long as that Renault engine will produce some sort of horsepower. But let's give tribute to Eddie Irvine and to Ferrari. This all-new car, it's got a V10 engine this year for the first time, and it's been a late car to be completed. It's quite complex technically, but they're going to finish the first Grand Prix with a new car. Lack of reliability was a major Achilles heel from Ferrari last year. They failed to finish most races that they started. And it looks too as if, apart from having a fast car, it's a relatively or potentially reliable car, and also that Eddie Irvine is going to give Michael Schumacher the best run that the German has had for his money for a long time, and that must be good news.
And it looks as though more than 50% of the original starters are going to finish this race. There are 11 running out of the 18 that started. Lap 57 for Damon Hill. He is on his penultimate lap, on his way to that emotional 14th Grand Prix victory, leading Villeneuve by 21 seconds. Villeneuve is 43 seconds ahead of the Ferrari of Eddie Irvine. Gerhard Berger is 18 seconds behind Irvine in the Benetton. Berger. Häkkinen is 5th. Salo is 6th and a lap adrift. Parnis is 7th. Frentzen is 8th. Rosset is 9th in his first Grand Prix, 2 laps down. Pedro Diniz is 10th, and Ukyo Katayama, the last runner, 2 laps down, 11th place.
Well, I must say, I think Damon Hill really deserves to win this race. He's driven immaculately throughout. He missed the pole by just 1/10 of a second. There was nothing in it. They were so close in qualifying. And in the race, he was able to shadow Villeneuve, who admittedly got the better start. He was on the better side of the road, not wishing to take anything away from Villeneuve's effort, which was absolutely outstanding here. But Damon followed the whole way through. It was Villeneuve who made the mistake. Hill backed off. He didn't want to get involved in an accident when Villeneuve recovered from it. And then again, he pulled by. He had some rough, tough treatment. And I think it's a bit of poetic justice that he's won here for the first race of the season. And incidentally, the winner of the first Grand Prix of the year has gone on to win the World Championship in the last 6 years. So that's a good omen for Damon Hill, but there's no doubt that Jacques Villeneuve is outstanding. He's a superb driver. He's fast, but most of all, he's really tough.
And the winner, which looks like Damon Hill, gets an absolutely magnificent trophy. A beautifully made silver bowl, which has got a replica of Jack Brabham's Cooper steering wheel around it, which has a gold centre with a laurel wreath, a gum leaf actually, and in the centre of that, some Australian Argyle diamonds, and the whole thing backed with carbon fibre. It's a magnificent trophy, and the constructor gets one as well. So it looks as though Damon is going to win the one, and Williams are going to win the other, because Damon Hill is now going into turn 13 out of 16 on the last lap of the Australian Grand Prix, which will be a double for Damon. He won in Adelaide last year by 2 laps, the last race in Adelaide, and he's going to win the first one in Melbourne convincingly to make it 2 on the trot. And Damon Hill crosses the line to win the Australian Grand Prix. Glenn Dix gives him the flag, as he gave the winners in Australia in that distinctive style of his. The crowd know a good winner when they see one, and Damon Hill is that man. Look at the reception he's getting, and we now just wait for Villeneuve to come through 30 seconds approximately after Damon Hill to give Williams those extra 6 points. There is Villeneuve in the beautifully clean Williams, which caused all the trouble for Damon Hill with the dirt on his rear wing. Villeneuve finishes second in the Grand Prix that he might so well have won, his first Grand Prix, and it's no discredit to him that he did not do so. He has made an indelible mark on Grand Prix racing. Starts from pole position for his first Grand Prix, finishes second, having led most of the way, and Eddie Irvine in the Ferrari finishes his first race for Maranello in 3rd position on the podium. A great, great drive, not just by Irvine, but by Villeneuve, also by Damon Hill. And Gerhard Berger and Mika Hakkinen will be coming through to finish 4th and 5th. The only other 2 drivers on the same lap as the winner, Damon Hill, who tours home on his 59th lap, having gone the full distance. And in 6th position, 1 lap down, will be Mika Salo. And the advice that Harvey Postlethwaite and Mike Gascoigne, his team bosses, gave him to watch it and make sure that he finished, has paid off, because it has given Salo and Tyrrell a World Championship point, which could make all the difference at the end of the season. Victory in Australia for Damon Hill, and he's equalled Graham's record, his great father. 14 Grand Prix wins for son and father. Well, there's Michael Schumacher. Well, he can smile. He really hasn't got anything to worry about. Exactly what he said would happen, happened. He said the Ferrari would not be reliable enough until they'd done a lot more work and a lot more testing. But he held the 2 Williams cars for lap after lap and dropped back through no fault of his own. Eddie Irvine has equalled his best performance. He was 3rd in Canada last year in the Jordan, up on the podium. He's going to be there again in Australia. And another bit of information for you. Eddie Irvine Villeneuve gets points in his first championship race as Eddie Irvine did. So that's the news from Australia. A great race to the start of what is clearly going to be a fabulous season. You can see how happy Damon Hill is. There's his team manager, Dickie Stanford, and there is Jacques Villeneuve. Victory for Hill, second for Villeneuve, third for Irvine. Maximum Constructors' Championship points for the Williams-Renault team. Fourth Berger, fifth Hakkinen, sixth Salo, and Australian Grand Prix, the first one at Melbourne, and very much a race to remember. Well, there's a couple of true sportsmen. They are friends, they get on extremely well together. So very often in a team you find that the drivers don't like each other because they are each other's main rival. But Hill and Villeneuve have formed an excellent rapport. I do hope that the pressures of competition won't interrupt it. It has in the past in other situations. And we ride home now with Eddie Irvine, who will be a very happy chap, and his Ferrari team will be overjoyed.
Yes, clearly no animosity there between Hill and Villeneuve, and that's lovely to see. But I do just slightly wonder what would have happened if Villeneuve hadn't had that engine problem and Hill had been held up by Villeneuve, or believed he'd been held up by Villeneuve throughout, and ended up being second with Villeneuve winning his first Grand Prix. Now that's jolly good to see too. Michael Schumacher's got a lot of respect for Eddie Irvine. That's come through very quickly. Eddie has settled in remarkably quickly to Ferrari. We've always said he's not been particularly fazed by anything, nor is Jacques Villeneuve. These are two drivers who just consider that being part of Formula One, battling wheel to wheel, being teammate to Michael Schumacher is just part of the normal scenario of things. And it'd be wonderful if the sportsmanship that we're seeing here today can continue throughout the year. I think we're going to see Irvine mixing it up there. We're going to see Benetton, the way that the pecking order has looked, Williams are undoubtedly on top. But Ferrari are going to be a stronger force, there's no question, than they have been of late. Benetton perhaps not quite as strong. Lacey was quick earlier on, we shouldn't forget that, but a bit of rush of blood to the head had him coming up the inside of Irvine, thankfully without any damage to Irvine's car.
Well, I don't know what the crowd has been here at Melbourne today. There were 150,000 people who had come here over the last 2 days. Adelaide had a record crowd for an Australian sporting event of some 203,000 people last year. And I was told that if there were two flies crawling up the window in the sporting capital of Australia, Melbourne, there would be 100,000 people to watch it. Well, there's a head count down there for you, and there's a heck of a lot of people. And what a wonderful introduction to Grand Prix racing Melbourne has had. And hats off, incidentally, to Jeff Kennett, the top man of the state of Victoria, and to Ron Walker, who is the man who was responsible for the Grand Prix coming here and has done so much to make it the magnificent event that it is.
So happiness, I think, from Williams, from Ferrari, indifference, I suspect, from Benetton. Not a good day for them, but frustration for Jordan with neither car finishing, and they had high hopes this year.
And what a wonderful sight that is. Damon Hill for the 14th time on the top step of the podium.
And now double winner of the Australian Grand Prix, back-to-back, Adelaide and Melbourne. Well, Henri Geoffrey Kennett, Premier of the state of Victoria, presents Damon Hill with that magnificent trophy, and it's made out of, it's meant to represent a steering wheel, but there's many of the metals and materials that are used in the manufacture of a Grand Prix car incorporated in that very special trophy. Look, Jacques Villeneuve lifts a hunk of glassware above his head, and there's a man who must rue the thought of, did I make that little error, and was that what caused me to lose a historic victory? Eddie Irvine again, absolutely delighted, totally laconic as he always is. And we wait now for the champagne, the Moet Chandon champagne. The champagne, the winners to be sprayed, as it is inevitably. And in a special bottle, a presentation bottle being provided by Moet Chandon for Damon Hill. There you see that silver bottle, unique in Grand Prix. You can't buy that bottle, it is only available for a Grand Prix winner.
And Damon Hill is just enjoying spraying that champagne around more than any other. He joins Gerhard Berger, Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna as twice winner of the Australian Grand Prix. But the most important thing for him is he starts off the season in style, and we'll be back in a moment to hear exactly all the news from the press conference.
Damon, you've won twice in Australia in the last 4 months. You must be delighted to get the 10-point lead.
Absolutely, and yeah, I feel fantastic, and I've got to say that everyone in the team deserves this. It's a terrific result, and I had a great race with Jack, and I'm delighted, obviously, to have come back to Australia and won, and you know, started the season the way I finished the last one.
It looks like it's going to be a pretty tough fight between you and Jacques this season.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be anything given away, and Jack showed today that he's a racer, and we had a good race, and I think the crowd should have you know, got something from that, and I'm sure they felt it was a good race too.
You had a few tricky moments about halfway through the race.
Yeah, I had a few tricky moments 3 or 4 times in the race, but everything went to plan, and you know, we stuck close together, and it was a thriller, I think.
Jacques, you must be a bit disappointed, having led for most of the race, not to end up winning it.
Well, for sure it's disappointing to lead most of the race and then having to slow down, but the whole race itself was fun. It was a great battle with Damon, and for sure today was a good demonstration of the Williams-Rothmans Renault, and it's a very strong package.
Eddie, the last time we saw you was in Montreal. Did you expect to have such a successful start with Ferrari?
Not really. We have had so many problems with reliability, and I've done very little running in the car, and to come here and be on the second row was really surprised us, and then for us to finish the race, you know, especially, you know, in the first race for Ferrari, it's a bit special, so I'm really pleased to be on the podium.
Damon, I look forward to Brazil.
Yeah, but for the moment I'm leading the World Championship, and I've got 3 weeks till the next race, so I'm going to savour every day of that. And I'd just like to say, you know, thanks to Melbourne as well for putting on such a great Grand Prix. It's a great weekend, and you know, Australia have done it again. I think it's a good kick-off to the season.
And Jacques, now can we have some in French?
Yeah, what do you want in French?
Just give us a few thoughts in French on the race.
C'était une course, c'était une bonne bataille, il y avait une bonne bataille avec Damon. C'est sûr que du point de vue pilotage, c'était très plaisant. Bon, c'est quand même une grosse déception de mener toute la course et de devoir ralentir à 5 tours de la fin à cause d'un problème de moteur. Mais au moins, ça a été une bonne démonstration de Williams-Rothmans.